My Seal accused me of being ungrateful after a trip with my brother, claiming I owed her thanks for babysitting her own kids. My 22F brother, 35M, surprised me 6 months ago by planning a trip to Scotland for my birthday. He knew I've never traveled before and wanted to take me to my dream country. Due to tight finances, it was just the two of us, which I was okay with since at the time him and I were close. For context, my brother is married and has 2 kids under 6. His wife, 34F, had said she was happy for me and didn't mind holding down the fort for a week while we're on the trip. Her and I have never been close and quite frankly just tolerate each other for the sake of keeping the peace. She's never been a fan of how close my siblings are with each other. It all comes down to growing up in different family dynamics, imo. Anyway, the trip was amazing and I loved every second of it. I was on such a high when we came back that I thanked my brother so many times for doing this for me until he told me to shut up. Lol, I thought everything was good and we resumed our lives normally. Imagine my surprise when I get a text 3 days after coming back from my Sil telling me off and calling me rude and ungrateful cause I didn't send her a text thanking her for babysitting on her own and having to do everything around her house for a whole week while I had fun with her husband. Yup, that's exactly how she worded it. I was flabbergasted. This is the same woman who smiled and told me to have fun on my trip, and now she's berating me for not thanking her for doing me a favor by taking care of her kids for a week. Am I crazy, or is that totally irrational and just weird? I told her I'm not sure taking care of your own children is babysitting, or doing someone else a favor, and she blew up at me calling me a terrible ungrateful brat and that I never show appreciation for anything. I was so confused by all of this and called my brother, but he doubled down and told me the trip wouldn't have been possible had she not volunteered to take care of their kids so we can have fun, and that I should be thanking her for doing it for me. I was and still am confused on why I need to thank a mother for taking care of her own kids. Anyway, to keep the peace I told her thanks for doing it, but she decided I wasn't being sincere and convinced my brother to go low contact with me. My siblings and my mom were confused by all of this but kept telling me to just bite my tongue and not stir the pot any further. But I'm just hurt and confused. My relationship with my brother has been strained since and it's taking a toll on me. I just need outside opinions cause I'm genuinely confused on whether or not I'm the asshole in this whole mess. This is my first time posting and English is not my first language, so excuse any errors. Edit. I can't reply to everyone, so let me clear up a few things I feel I should have included. They do not share finances. She has never spent any money on anything related to me. Also, last year she took a trip with her siblings abroad as well, and no, I don't know if her siblings thanked my brother for watching his kids. Finances were tight as my brother was paying out of his own pocket and wouldn't have been able to take anyone else with us. This trip was a birthday gift, not a family trip, so no one expected to join. I did thank them both when I was first told about the trip, and I asked my brother if he was sure it was okay for us to go, and he assured me we were set and I only needed to have fun. I later learned that she didn't contribute anything to the trip and said she wouldn't have wanted to take a trip with me anyway. Hope this clears something's up. Update. 5 days later. Thank you to everyone for the insight on my previous post. The post kinda blew up in a way I wasn't expecting and the responses were overwhelming, but I now understand that I did not react correctly to her texts. This is a long update since a lot has happened. To clear up a few things before I continue with the update, a lot of you are fixated on the fact that I said finances are tight. I didn't mean their overall finances. They have separate finances, and from my understanding, they only share finances when it comes to their household and kids. Anything else they pay from their own pockets and don't interfere in what they spend their money on as long as the kids are good and household is running smoothly. So since my brother was paying for this trip on his own, he couldn't take many people with him as that would put a bigger financial burden on his personal savings. They're doing fine financially. They take family trips once a year. I did thank them both when I was initially told about the trip. My Sil later made a snide comment about how this was all my brother and she didn't contribute to the trip at all. Last year Sil and her siblings went on their own trip while my brother took care of everything and he was fine with it. My family dynamic is apparently confusing you guys, but we're 5 siblings that are very close and hang out regularly and have a close bond with our mom, especially since our dad passed away. We are from an Asian country and the culture here and the bonds between families are different from the West. To those who said maybe she's salty, I'm getting a trip when I've never helped them out. I babysat my Sil's babies for 5 days a week for months each time her maternity leave ended, and each time they stopped needing me to help out only my brother thanks me, and that's fine with me. Sil has never thanked me or my siblings for anything we do for them. She says the fact that we're so eager and willing to drop everything to take care of each other is weird and unhealthy. I did thank her once I realized I should just keep the peace and tell her what she wanted to hear. Still, she didn't accept my thank you after I made the babysitting your own kids comment. I understand I was an for saying that now, since a lot of you have pointed out that it was rude and that I'm not a mother and don't get it. But to be fair, her texts were full of insults. She kept doubling down on the fact that she was stuck babysitting because of me. Many of you asked why I wasn't offered the ticket and went on my own. In our culture, women, especially young ones, don't travel on their own without either a family member or their husbands. It's not about control but more out of protection for us, so going on my own wouldn't have been an option. On to the update. Strap in, this is a long one. So I talked with my mom to better understand the situation, since many of you said I'm not a mother and don't get it. And she said my Sil worded it wrong, but maybe she just wanted gratitude for helping my brother out, cause being a parent isn't easy. I understand that I reacted to her messages wrong when I could have just said a simple thank you, but neither I or my mom understand why she was so aggressive towards me in her texts. The aggression is what made me become so defensive. I found out from my siblings and my mom that my brother only paid for the tickets and the accommodations, and that my eldest brother is the one that provided the pocket money for food and buying stuff on the trip, and that my siblings chipped in but didn't want the credit since my brother wanted this trip to be like a thank you for helping them out so much with their kids over the years, and that he had cleared it with his wife and she had given him the go-ahead. She also told me that he had asked Sil if she wanted to come with us on the trip and leave their kids with my mom, who was fine with that. But she declined as she and I aren't close and it would have been weird for the both of us. My mom told me that my brother actually asked her to check in every day with Sil to make sure all was well and to see if she needed anything. She also said my brother asked Sil's sisters to check on her as well. It turns out Sil had taken the week off of work. I didn't know that. And for 4 out of the 7 days we were in Scotland, she dropped her kids off at my mom's, and the other 3 days when my mom called, Sil said she had her sisters with her and didn't need any help, so what the hell was she so mad about? It's clear to me that she wasn't abandoned by my brother as some of you suggested. My siblings initially wanted to just keep the peace, but after I showed them my Sil's text they were surprised and appalled by her words. They thought this whole thing was a simple misunderstanding and now understand that it had become bigger and that my brother and I aren't talking. My sister decided to investigate and called my brother to understand what happened, and it turns out my Sil told him that my mom and siblings didn't check in on her at all, which is a lie. My sister even dropped off food for them twice. And that the kids were upset their dad left them and were throwing tantrums all the time, also probably not true, and that this wasn't what they had agreed on when he told her about the trip months ago. He was too busy trying to calm my Sil down to confirm with the family whether or not it was true. My sister then asked him if he'd seen the text his wife had sent me, and he said he hadn't, but that Sil told him she'd just asked me for a simple thank you for all her hard work, and that I blew up at her and told her she didn't deserve anything since she didn't pay for the trip and that she was entitled. He said he was hesitant about believing that since he knows I'd never outright disrespect someone like that even if I don't get along with them, but she insisted that it happened and that she had no reason to lie, and as her husband she needed his support, not his questioning, and that's why he sent me the text saying I needed to thank her. My sister then let my brother know about everything that happened and told him, more like demanded, that they apologize to me, which I didn't think was necessary. I just wanted my brother to talk to me again, and he sounded upset and told her he'll figure this out after talking to his wife. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Sil and my brother had a massive fight and he demanded to know why she lied and caused so much drama, and she broke down and told him that he was too close to me and my siblings and that she hated how the whole family babied me, I'm the youngest, and that his siblings' relationship with each other made her uncomfortable and she just wanted him to put a little distance between himself and us because her family isn't as close to each other, and kept telling her our close dynamic is weird and toxic. He told her her behavior is unacceptable and that she caused a rift between not only him and I but also him and the rest of his siblings as well, because now they're mad at him. My brother did call me and he apologized for doubling down on what his wife said. He said it was already tense in their house and he was just trying to keep the peace and be supportive, but he shouldn't have treated me this way. When deep down he knew I wasn't at fault. He also let me know that for the time being Sil will go NC with my siblings and I while they go to marriage counseling, and Sil goes to therapy because her behavior wasn't normal. He sounded exhausted and defeated, and I just told him we're all here for him if he needs us. He made it clear that the NC is only for my Sil and assured me he won't limit his contact with me, and apologized for doing so without even talking to me first. I asked him if he'd like me to reach out to her and apologize for what I said and give her a sincere thank you, but he said no, that it was never about the gratitude to begin with, and that it's apparently a bigger issue between them that they need to figure out on their own, that we shouldn't contact Sil unless she reaches out first as she doesn't want to have any contact with us. He also apologized for her language with me on the text, but I told him not to worry about it. Safe to say Sil's relationship with us is never going to be the same again after this, and to be honest I wasn't the biggest fan of hers, but I was civil and polite to her in the past cause my brother loves her and we've never had any issues prior to this. I do feel really guilty that all this happened because of the trip planned for me, but my siblings keep telling me it's not my fault. My mum says I should have just thanked my sil and kept the peace instead of having this all blow up so much, but my siblings told her that even if I had apologized it wouldn't have mattered as my sil would have found something else to cause a problem. But they also told me what a lot of you had mentioned in the comments, that saying thank you was the polite thing to do, and that taking care of kids full-time is not the same as babysitting them for a few hours, and it would have been good to tell her she's appreciated. But they understand that I don't have the understanding of what it means to be a parent, and that having someone basically verbally attack me wouldn't have made me reciprocate with kindness. And I get it, I was ignorant about it and I acknowledge that. There are a lot more details, but that's the gist of it. Brother and sil's marriage is strained and so is his relationship with us, but I hope that everything works out okay. I really love my brother and hate seeing him so defeated. Part of me wishes we never went on that trip because all this drama is draining. To clarify something, the only reason I was questioning the whole "I babysat my kids as a favor to you" is because I always see people criticizing fathers who say that and calling them out because kids are the parents' responsibility and not a chore or a favor for anyone. I thought this applied to both mothers and fathers, but perhaps I was mistaken because my only point of reference on this topic is what I see on the internet as I'm not a mum, and since a lot of you have said I'm the AH and that she deserved a thank you and a gift. I messed up the thank you part, but I did buy her a magnet for their fridge since she likes to collect them. I went a little crazy and brought back little souvenirs for myself and everyone else as well, and it would have been weird and rude to give her kids gifts and not her, so I got every single family member a small Scottish-themed present. I was excited about being in Scotland, lol. Thank you all for your insights and advice. I really appreciate it whether you thought I was or wasn't the AH. All your opinions put things into perspective for me. Some comments were outright nasty though, and I didn't think name-calling was productive or necessary, but oh well, that's the internet. Also, if you saw the OG post on some podcast sub, it's because my friend saw my post and told me to post it there cause she's a fan of them and thinks the podcasters would be entertained by it. I wasn't seeking out validation from a different sub, she was just excited by the idea that her favorite podcast might read out a post about someone she knows. She's weird but I love her so I did it, that's all. Now to the next story, story 2. My ex-wife and her wife want my son to call her mom, and adopt him to move to Spain. I firmly oppose, protecting my rights as his father. Hi all. Throwaway because my friends are not completely aware of this current situation. I, 35 million, was married to my ex-wife, 34F, for 7 years. 2 years ago my ex-wife came out as lesbian. This came as a complete shock to me. She and her partner were co-workers who had an affair since she joined the company a year before our divorce. We have a son together, 8 million. This came as a complete shock to me. I was heartbroken and devastated. I felt betrayed as I had spent 7 years of my life with this woman and it all felt like a lie now. When I confronted her, she told me that she had to live her truth, and that she tried to suppress her identity because she didn't come to terms with it till she met her partner. When I asked whether she loved me, she told me that while she loves me it's different than how she loved her new partner. This broke my heart even further. The divorce was quick as she did not want anything from me and we agreed to a 50-50 split of custody. But I decided to go no contact with her and handled the custody transfer process through my sister, 27F, whom I moved in with after the divorce. I sold the house and we mutually agreed that the excess money from the sale will be in a college fund for our son in the future. I could not bear to stay in that house anymore as it kept reminding me of her betrayal. For context, she introduced her partner as her work friend, and I believed her. I had no reason to suspect anything and they had several girls' nights, but I figured that they were probably using these as cover for the affair. For 6 months I was in a depressive state because I didn't know where I went wrong. But this is one of those scenarios that anything I would have done wouldn't have been able to make it better. This made me even more depressed, and the fact that all the vows and little things that she said at our wedding were all just lies trying to keep up a ruse made it even worse. The two people that got me through this state was my sister, whom I am eternally grateful for helping with her nephew and helping me while maintaining her career. The other person that got me through this was my college ex-girlfriend. Around 4 months after the divorce we reconnected at a reunion and she really helped through the worst of it as a friend. Around a year after the divorce, we started officially dating, and I introduced her to my son. During all this time my ex's partner had been having limited interactions with my son. This was not because of me saying anything, but my ex-wife wanted him to adjust to his new reality. My son is in that weird age where he understands what's going on but he doesn't really understand what's actually going on. If you know, you know. He understands that mommy has a girlfriend and that me and his mom are not together anymore. I'm pretty happy considering we didn't really talk to him about the LGBTQ+ stuff because we had decided that we can talk about this when he's a bit older, but I'm happy that he's come to terms with the divorce. Around 8 months ago, my ex said that she was officially moving in with her partner and that she was engaged. At this point I still was in no contact except brief conversations that concerned our son. She invited me to the wedding but I declined. They were planning to have a destination wedding in Spain where her girlfriend lives. She wanted to take our son to the wedding and he would have to miss school for a week since she wanted him to meet her girlfriend's family as well. I told her that missing school for a week does not make sense and that she should plan her wedding when he has vacation since she doesn't have a fixed date yet. She argued that most likely they won't have a date that will align with his vacations and that they are getting married as soon as possible. I relented and agreed since I didn't want to interact with her anymore and it was well within her rights to have her son at her wedding. The problem started when my son came back after the wedding. He was supposed to stay with me since we have a flexible week in week out custody arrangement. She wanted to take my son on her honeymoon so that he has a chance to bond with his new stepmother. I told her that she had already had 2 weeks with him since she had custody for a week before the wedding and that I wanted to spend some father-son time with him. I told her that it is well within my rights and that she should go spend some time with her new wife. She argued that since our son's interactions with her partner were limited because of her busy schedule, that this was a great opportunity for them to bond. I told her that she had 2 weeks for him to get to know her partner. She said that they were busy with the wedding and did not have time. I told her that I had taken vacation days for us to go to a motorcycle expo and build a Lego set, 2 things that my son absolutely loves. She kept arguing and I finally told her that the custody was placed for a reason and that's the one thing I will not negotiate on. She got angry at me and left. Me and my son had a great experience. I even got him one of those kid-sized motorcycles since he liked them so much. Over the next few weeks we returned back to our week-in week-out routine. One day I find that my ex posted a photo shoot of them and my son under a caption of #lesbianmommies. I thought that it was a post and it probably meant nothing but it was showing them as a family and something about that did not sit right with me. When I got my son for the week I asked him if his mom was saying anything to him. He relented a bit but told me that his mother had been trying to convince him to call her partner his mom. This was a shock to me as I never expected my ex to do this. Then again I've been wrong about these things before. I asked him if that's something he wanted and he told me that he is much more comfortable calling her by her first name and that he feels weird with calling 2 people mom. I told him it's okay and that he shouldn't feel pressured to do anything. I called my ex and asked her to meet up because this was serious and I wanted to discuss this. I confronted her about this and she told me that since her and her partner were married, it's only natural for our son to have 2 moms now. I told her that it's not okay for her to try and convince him into calling her partner his mom because she is not his mother. She doesn't have an active parenting role in his life and that any major parenting decisions require the 2 of us. She tried making an argument that since me and my girlfriend were becoming serious now and that eventually I might want him to start calling her mom. I told her even if we become serious I won't try and convince our son to start calling her mom, because he already has 2 parents and he doesn't need more. Then she dropped the bombshell on me. She told me that she and her partner were hoping that eventually down the line they can file for adoption. I'll still be able to visit and see my son but she wanted her and her wife to have legal guardianship because they wanted to build a new family with them. I told her absolutely not and that our partners have no say in our kids' lives. She accused me of being homophobic for denying her the right to a complete family and I told her while her life is her choice our son's life has to be a thing that we decide ourselves. I ended the conversation there and told my son to tell me if her mother tries to force him to do anything that he doesn't want to do. 3 weeks later I found out that my ex had enrolled him in Spanish lessons that he told me that he hated doing. For context my ex is Latin and her partner is Spanish so they are more comfortable talking to each other in Spanish. We made the decision to raise our son in English because it made sense at the time as she speaks English better than Spanish and I don't speak any Spanish. When I discussed this she told me that she would like her son to connect more to his heritage. I said that I don't have any problem with that but we have tried this several times before when we were married and he had shown zero interest in it. She told me that this time might be different since he will have 2 Spanish speakers at home. I told her that I am in favor of bilingualism because 2 languages are always an advantage especially for kids but if he doesn't want to do it there is no reason to force him to do it, maybe try another language? She then accuses me of denying our son his roots and goes on a tirade of accusing me of denying our son his identity and coming back to me denying her right to a family. My girlfriend usually stays out of these matters but she advised me to contact my lawyer and see what they can actually do. My lawyer told me that even if they send an adoption notice, I can contest it and it would take something exceptional like abandonment etc. for my contest to get rejected. My ex keeps posting our son as a part of her new family and it's honestly started to trigger me. 2 weeks ago I interacted for the first time with my ex's new wife after the divorce. She contacted me and asked to meet up. She told me that my ex had finally started to recover from the social trauma of coming out and building a new life with her and that I am now getting in the way of happiness. She accused me of being emotionless and uncaring through our divorce and how I guilt-tripped her into agreeing to my demands of 50-50 custody, and how I should just agree to the eventual adoption in a few years because she has always wanted a son and that I will still remain my son's dad and I can still visit him. I told her that I don't care what her emotional state was during the divorce and that my demands were fair even to the most irrational person. I told her that if they want to create this image of a perfect family, then they should have another kid that has no connection to me. I feel like all this has started to affect my son more than anything. He is a lot less happier than he was just a few months ago as we had started to adjust to this new reality. For context, since I know this is going to come up eventually, the emotional trauma of my ex coming out is basically the fact that her family effectively disowned her after coming out. Her parents don't talk to her anymore, while my son has plenty of interactions with his maternal grandparents when he's with me. Those two combined make significantly more money than I do alone. However, my ex-wife makes less money than me, but her partner is in a senior position, so she has more stability. This is also an argument my ex-wife used when we discussed adoption, since they can then send our son to a private school and generally give him a better life. I don't know if this is a factor, but the recent elections may have caused this because they are worried that they might not be able to adopt soon, but they don't want to adopt my son now but in a few years, so I doubt this to be true. Edit. I posted an update now. Update. Hi all. It seems that my draft went missing somehow and I'm sorry for posting a couple of empty blocks. Original post is here. It's been crazy seeing everyone's reactions to the situation and I wanted to share a quick update with you all. First of all, I'd like to clarify that my son and I have been going to therapy since the divorce. He was doing quite well until the whole mom saga happened. My in-laws disowned her after she came out. They were not even aware about the affair when she came out to them. They still spend time with my grandson under the condition that they don't badmouth my ex and don't preach their views to him. They agreed and said that they valued a relationship with their grandson over any political view they might hold. I have been a part of every interaction that they have had with him because I was worried they might say something. Thankfully, this has not been the case. Her extended family has said to me that they have all cut her off as well, some for the affair and some for her being gay. Our mutual friends also cut her off because of the affair. All our mutual friends were my work buddies and their spouses, partners. I did not ask them to do anything. They came to the decision on their own. I was actually glad when she told me that she had made a friend on her own, as she used to complain about not liking her colleagues. We all know how that turned out. I'm pretty sure they're not planning to skip the country. I have all my son's documents and we decided it during the divorce because she was still figuring out where to go, and since I was moving in with my sister, the chances of them getting misplaced were low. I have also had no demands for any documents and she returned the passport to me when we came back. The whole adoption thing probably stems from the fact that my son has a very close relationship with his mother. The only times he has really complained to me is when she asked him to call her partner mom, and that she was making him do Spanish classes that he did not want. We did everything for him equally during our marriage, but I had to travel out of state to my parents frequently during COVID, because they were sick with pre-existing conditions and couldn't take care of themselves. My sister was on an assignment abroad at that time. My sister also agreed with this. Please let me know your thoughts. I listened to people and contacted my lawyer, who is also my friend, today morning. He told me the same thing as last time and that it would take something really unusual for the adoption process to go through, like child abandonment. He also said that they a bunch of idiots that have no idea how the law worked. He also told me that if the whole, "we want to adopt him," is a real thing and if she is talking shit about me to my son and I could prove it, I could get custody. This has not been the case, as I've not heard my son say that his mom says bad things about me. This brought me a sigh of relief. I plan to contact my ex today with the following conditions. We both install parenting apps and document all interactions. No more mention to me or my son regarding adoption or calling her partner mom. No more posting images of my son as a part of their perfect queer family, because frankly, I don't want my son photos on the internet when he is so young and he can decide what he wants when he is older. I plan to talk to my ex in a couple of hours. Please let me know what you think about this. Final update. Hi all. So I talked to my ex today. She was busy yesterday and I wanted some more time to gather my thoughts. When we met, I put forth my demands. She told me that the parenting app idea seems fine and that she has no problem with it. She got sad when I told her to drop the idea of adoption and call her partner mom, as it's just not gonna happen. She told me that her family was pressuring her to settle down. I proposed after a year of dating and I did not know this, and getting pregnant so soon after getting married was not what she had in mind. She got pregnant 1.5 years after getting married. Is that soon, IDK? She told me that she was in the closet all her life because of her parents and that she thought marrying me would cause her feelings to subside and that she was happy until she met her partner. She did go through postpartum depression after giving birth, but I did not know that she didn't want to get pregnant so soon. She then told me, her wife and her, that the reason they wanted to adopt my son was because she wanted to start new. She then said that she was never really happy during our marriage and that with her new wife she could have the family she always dreamt of having. She didn't want my son to grow up to resent her for being a lesbian, as he doesn't have any exposure to people like her apart from her and her partner. Look, I have to be honest here, I don't know any gay people, nor anyone in my friends or family is gay. We never talked about these things because it simply doesn't come up in our daily life, but that doesn't mean me and my son have no idea who they are, especially after the divorce. I told her that this is not going to happen and that he has had a lot of exposure to people from her community. I told her that seems like a bullshit reason for separating my son and me, and that she is making up some random reason to make her seem like it is. After some arguing, she told me the real reason why she and her partner want to adopt my son. Reddit is crazy for their prediction abilities, like honestly, wow. Apparently they wanted to adopt my son because her wife and her are considering moving to Spain in few years. I told her that she can't do that and that the legal framework supports me and my rights in both countries. She told me she knew this and that's why they wanted to get me to sign adoption. I told her that she was crazy, that she in no way is able to do this, as she still need my permission to take him out of the country as when she did when they got married in Spain. I also read a comment yesterday on the update and researched a bit on the laws regarding this, so I know this is not happening. She told me again that they have done their research and that this was to see if I would agree. In case I agreed, they would consider moving, and in case I didn't, because she doesn't want to be separated from my son. I again emphasize that this is not going to happen, and that if she tries anything or says anything to my son, I will sue for full custody. She got sad again and told me that they wanted to check with me first. I told her, in what world would you expect me to give you and your wife full custody? First you divorce me, leave me a woman, and then expect me to sign over my child and act like nothing happened. I told her from this point on we will document everything, every interaction we have, and that if I even get a whiff of you trying to pull something, I will sue for full custody. She got a bit scared at the idea of losing full custody. She didn't really consider me doing that, and she agreed. I then told her not to paint this picture of a picture-perfect queer family that they are trying to do, because that is not going to happen. Our son has a mom and a dad that he spends half his time each with, not two moms. He is not your affair partner's son. He is your son and mine. If you want a child with her, you can do so on your own. I then told her that the courts are more likely to side with me than you in this case because of the thing you have been trying to do and the fact that I work from home and spend more actual time with him than you and your wife. I have been trying for him to have a stable relationship with both parents since the divorce because I don't want him to reset either of us, but if you try to remove me from his life, I will sue for full custody and deal with any resentment he has for either of us. I didn't want to argue anymore and I left the room. I secretly recorded the conversation because I wanted to have proof in case anything happens in the future. Honestly, Reddit, I have been very angry at my ex since the divorce. I have not shown it around her and my son because I don't want her to use this against me in any way, and have been going to therapy, but I am still internally angry. The comments she made today about our marriage really hurt me even more. I have spent 7 years with this woman and her betrayal still makes me angry to this day. When I got home, I contacted my lawyer friend and he again reiterated that they would have to kidnap him. I asked him if there was anything else we could do and he said that the current agreement is very thorough. We have made sure of that. If I want full custody or not is up to me, but I have to be sure that I want to put me or my son through the whole process. I don't want my son to grow up without either of his parents, as that is just not healthy for him. That is why I won't sue for full custody now. If they are stupid enough to kidnap him, I'm sure they are not. Then the law sides with me anyway. I know what position her partner is at their workplace, so I know they are making good money to leave it all behind for no good reason. As for the passport thing, I have all his documents, and all things such as notifying travel, hospital visits, and others are already in the signed custody agreement. We already have a legal framework for all this. I am not going to sue for full custody now because I don't want that for my son. My ex-wife is still a good mother and loves him and he enjoys spending time with her, plus my son is the type of person to openly voice out what he does not find okay to me, so I will know if they continue any of their nonsense. On a more positive note, y'all, I'm not against Spanish lessons, but he doesn't like them. I was just suggesting that he try some language he likes. There are other languages out there. I didn't say it to my ex then, but now I know that she was trying for him to learn Spanish because of the Spain thing. Thank you to everyone for their support, it really helped me with understanding the problem. Holy shit though, I didn't even consider her considering moving to Spain until I read the comments. Y'all are great at this. Now to the next story, story 3. Am I the asshole for not helping my sister, who became homeless right after giving birth to her baby with my soon-to-be ex-husband? My sister, 24F, and I, 26F, were really close our whole lives, and we moved away from our parents together when she was 18 and I was 20. I met my, soon-to-be, ex-husband here and we got married, and my sister stayed close. We spent a lot of time together. Then a few months ago I learned my sister was pregnant and my husband was the father. I ended my marriage to him immediately, and I told my sister I wanted nothing more to do with her and she was on her own. I had some of her stuff at my place and left it at my ex's place for her. For the rest of the pregnancy they were living together, and then he wouldn't let her back in after the baby was born. She called our parents from the hospital and told them she had nowhere to go. That he was looking for custody and didn't want her back, and I wasn't answering her calls. So they called me, and after I heard them explain what was going on I told them it wasn't my problem. They tried to argue, but I wasn't having any of it. She got a place at a shelter for single parents and she's still there several weeks on. With the custody dispute she can't move back to our parents, and I am still refusing to help her out. My parents are angry because I won't even take her calls or reply to any messages she's sent. I actually blocked her because I knew she wouldn't stop. My parents don't know that part. But they're telling me I should be ashamed of myself for turning my back on her and the baby. I told my parents I owe her and the baby nothing. I told them it was just a shame she didn't choke on his dick when they were sleeping together behind my back. My parents called me disgusting for leaving them homeless. That I have room and could help. Am I the asshole? Now, on to the next story. Story 4. I was a shadow to my sister's piano career, exploited as my family's ATM. They even used my money for her secret engagement party. I, 35F, am a senior investment analyst for a major Manhattan firm, yet to my family, I am nothing more than a personal ATM. I've been hesitant to tell this tale, but recent developments have compelled me to seek outside viewpoints on a subject that has dominated my life for years. Growing up, our entire family revolved on my younger sister, 31F. She was a piano prodigy who began performing at the age of 4. My earliest memories are of helping Mom, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and Dad, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, prepare for her recitals, ensuring that everything was just right for their little star. While other kids were learning to ride bikes or going on playdates, I was learning how to iron performance costumes and organize sheet music. Make sure your sister has everything she needs for practice, Mom would say, barely looking up from her phone as she recorded another video of my sister's performance. Don't forget to cook dinner. We'll be late tonight due to her master's class. By the age of 11, I was effectively controlling the home. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, it all fell on me. Because your sister needs to focus on her music, was the incessant refrain. I recall the day I won the state mathematics competition in 8th grade. I went home, clutching my award, only to find Mom furiously preparing for my sister's performance. "That's nice, honey," she commented distractedly. "But could you please assist your sister practice? She needs to perfect this piece for the Carnegie Hall Youth Showcase next month." The trophy wound up in a box in my closet, alongside other forgotten accomplishments. The tendency persisted throughout high school. While my sister traveled for competitions and master lessons, I stayed at home and maintained flawless marks. My parents paid thousands of dollars for my sister's private lessons, special music camps, and custom-made performance apparel. Meanwhile, I had to fight for essential school materials. "We need to be practical," Dad would say. "Your sister's career development requires all of our resources." I was not permitted to participate in any after-school events since someone needed to be present at home to prepare for my sister's nighttime practice sessions. When I indicated an interest in joining the debate team, Mom looked at me as if I had suggested we burn down the home. "How could you be so selfish?" she asked. "Your sister needs a peaceful, encouraging atmosphere to practice. You understand how crucial this is to her future." Every family gathering became a recital. Relatives would gather around the piano, gushing about my sister's skill as I served refreshments and cleaned up afterwards. "Such a helpful girl," they'd say patronizingly before turning back to compliment my sister. I learned to be invisible, moving softly through our house like a ghost, ensuring that everything ran properly while drawing no notice to myself. My parents only truly noticed me when anything went wrong with my sister's routine. Then I became visible, but just as a target for blame. If she had a poor performance, it was because I had not provided a calm setting for her practicing. If she felt fatigued during a competition, it was because I hadn't properly prepared her meals. During my senior year of high school, I was admitted into several top universities on partial scholarships. When I showed my parents the acceptance letters, their reaction was lukewarm, at best. "We can't help with any expenses," Dad stated firmly during supper. "Your sister's career development needs all our resources. Besides, you're good with household management, maybe you should look into becoming a housekeeper." That's when our neighbors, the Wilsons, intervened. They had seen me grow up and how I helped at their little accounting office after school while waiting for my sister's practices to finish. Mrs. Wilson, 55 degrees Fahrenheit at the time, had always regarded me as a second daughter, taking an interest in my accomplishments and promoting my academic endeavors. They promised to help with my education fees by establishing up a work-study program at their company. My parents didn't complain, they appeared happy to have me taken care of, so they could concentrate only on my sister. When I attempted to talk about my college plans, Mom cut me off. "We trust the Wilsons to handle it," she added, immediately returning to her phone and organizing my sister's next appearances. "Just make sure this doesn't interfere with your responsibilities at home." The Wilsons became my lifeline. Their encouragement extended beyond financial aid. They demonstrated what it meant to be respected for my own qualities and accomplishments. Mrs. Wilson attended my college orientation when my parents were unable to come due to my sister's summer music festival. Mr. Wilson, 57 million at the time, educated me on financial management and sparked my interest in investment research. Looking back, I understand the Wilsons saw something my parents didn't. A young woman with promise beyond being someone's support network. They supported my education not because they had to, but because they believed in me. Their advice helped me get internships, which led to my current career as a senior investment analyst. Throughout college, I had little touch with my family, only traveling home for important holidays. Each visit followed the same pattern. My sister conducting court in the living room while I assisted in the kitchen, listening to relatives praise her most recent accomplishments. My own accomplishments, Dean's List accolades, internships at famous firms, job offers, were largely overlooked. Everything changed 10 years ago, at what was supposed to be my sister's breakthrough moment. She was preparing for the prestigious Chicago International Piano Competition, which my parents were confident would propel her career to new heights. They'd spent months working out every element, from her performance pieces to her stage demeanor. Even her food was methodically planned to keep her in top-performing condition. The injury occurred during an especially intensive practice session. She was working on Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, a notoriously difficult piece that she persisted on performing despite her teacher's objections. I was at work when Mom called me, her voice quivering with hysteria. "Get to Northwestern Memorial ASAP. Your sister, her wrist, you must come right soon." I discovered them in the ER. Mom screaming violently, Dad pacing like a caged animal, and my sister pale and mute, cradling her right wrist. The diagnosis was devastating. Significant tendon injury with potential nerve involvement. The doctor's words sounded like hammers in the sterile hospital room. Significant rehabilitation is required. Prognosis is unknown. Professional performance might no longer be possible. The next few months were a blur of specialists, second opinions, and increasingly frantic attempts at treatment. My parents liquidated everything they could, including Dad's prized vintage Mustang collection, Mom's family antiques, and even their retirement savings. They flew in European specialists, attempted experimental treatments, and sought advice from alternative medicine practitioners, anything that gave them hope. I watched their finances vanish as they sought miraculous treatments. When their financial advisor suggested bankruptcy protection, they looked at him as if he had suggested abandoning their child. "Money is just money," Dad said. "Our daughter's talent is priceless." I saw he said daughter, as he normally does. Reality set in gradually, like a slow-moving storm. Despite multiple treatments, my sister's wrist never recovered the strength and flexibility required for professional performance. The physicians eventually verified our fears. Her career as a concert pianist was ended. It was more than simply the loss of a profession. It was the dissolution of our entire family mythos. My parents became older in just a few months. Mom stopped fixing her hair and cosmetics, and spent days in her bathrobe viewing footage of my sister's previous performances. Dad, who had always been the family's rock, began missing appointments, bills, and even food. Sometimes they appeared lost, as if their identities were inextricably linked to my sister's musical career. That's when their focus moved to me. But not in the way I had secretly wanted for all those years. They regarded me not as their daughter who could help them recover, but as a financial answer to their escalating issues. I had recently gotten a huge promotion at my firm, becoming a senior analyst before the age of 30, an accomplishment that would have gone unnoticed if it hadn't come with a substantial income rise. "You're doing so well," Mom said on one of her first calls to me in months. Her prideful tone was swiftly followed by, "Your sister needs help with her medical bills. Since you're in such a good position now?" The request was wrapped in layers of remorse and obligation, given with the skillful manipulation that only a mother can perform. At first, I agreed to make a modest monthly donation of $1,000 to help with my sister's therapy and living expenses. It appeared sensible, even necessary. They were family, after all, and I was finally able to give back. The thankfulness looked sincere at first. Mom phoned me on a regular basis to check on my sister's progress, while Dad wrote awkward but emotional thank you emails. But the requests kept coming, each one bigger than the last, with increasingly convoluted excuses. My sister wanted a new automobile because public transportation made her anxious following the incident. My sister's recuperation was hampered by negative energy in the house, which required repair. They required a family vacation because emotional healing is just as important as physical therapy. Then came the credit cards. Just for emergencies, they said, and I was added as an authorized user to their accounts. Their concept of an emergency was surprisingly fluid. Shopping became retail therapy, costly restaurants were necessary for maintaining family bonds during a crisis, and luxury spa retreats were considered essential for recovery. Monthly expenses rose like ivy on a wall, gradually at first, then abruptly overpowering. $1,000 became $2,000, and finally $3,000. Each increment was followed by detailed explanations and emotional manipulation. "After everything we've done for you," became their regular refrain, though I couldn't recall exactly what they'd done. When I hesitated over a particularly substantial request, Mom reminded me of all the sacrifices they'd made, conveniently forgetting that those sacrifices were solely for my sister. My buddy Rachel, 35F, whom I've known since college, was watching the situation with growing concern. "They're not treating you like family," she explained during our weekly dinner at her parents' restaurant. "They're treating you like an ATM with legs." I dismissed her concerns at first, making excuses about family commitments and filial duty. But her comments stayed with me like burrs. The Wilsons, my long-standing mentors, were also concerned. Mrs. Wilson took me aside after our monthly lunch meeting. "Honey," she began, her face wrinkled with concern. "This is not support, it is exploitation. We didn't help you advance your job so you could become your family's personal banker." The breaking point came last week, when I realized they had spent more than $122,000 on my sister's therapeutic shopping spree, without telling me. The expenses included designer clothes, spa treatments, and a weekend at a luxury resort, all explained as necessary for her emotional recovery. When I tried to talk about setting boundaries, Mom fell into tears and gave an Oscar-worthy act about how I was abandoning the family in our time of need. Later that night, Dad called. His voice was gruff and disapproving, using the same authoritarian tone that had kept me in line throughout my youth. "Your sister requires our assistance more than ever," he admonished. "How can you be so selfish when she's still trying to find her way? We've raised you better than this." The irony of his words, "we raised you," hit me like a physical blow. Did they raise me, or did I raise myself under the influence of their obsession with my sister? Yesterday, I received another credit card statement for $115,000 for a health retreat that I never approved. When I called to inquire, my sister answered the phone. "You make so much money," she added dismissively, with the same arrogant tone I remembered from childhood. "Stop being stingy. You know Mom and Dad need this to deal with everything they've been through because of me." I'm writing from my office on the 47th level of our Manhattan building, surrounded by the trappings of my success, despite, rather than because of, my family's support. The chart on my second monitor depicts my family's financial abuse in cold, hard statistics. Over the last year, they've spent more than $150,000 of my money, which is more than most families' annual income. My financial consultant is concerned about the implications for my long-term financial security. My therapist gently indicates that it is important to set hard boundaries. Rachel alternates between providing her guest room and volunteering to tell my family where they can go, in many languages, thanks to her worldwide business experience. But every time I consider cutting them off, I remember the little girl who simply wanted her parents to appreciate her accomplishments. The adolescent who believed that if she worked hard enough, someone would eventually recognize her as more than a support system. The young woman who still hopes that her family would see her as more than a resource. I'm currently at a crossroads, confronting decisions I never intended to make. The Wilsons, who have been more like parents to me than my own, advise I should protect myself. Rachel provides practical assistance and a secure place to ponder. My therapist discusses boundaries and self-respect, words that appear easy but bear the weight of decades of familial relationships. I'm having trouble with questions that don't seem to have any correct answers. Am I being ruthless by considering financial constraints? Is it immoral to want appreciation for my own achievements? Should I simply accept that this is my job in the family, the dependable one, the responsible one, the human ATM? I really don't know anymore. Update 1. My world imploded yesterday when I found on Instagram that my parents are presently in Hawaii, not for a vacation, but for my sister's secret engagement party, which they paid for with my credit card. During lunch, I was aimlessly scrolling through my feed when I came across a post from a mutual acquaintance that stopped me cold. Paradise with the future wife, what's Josh, engagement bliss the Hawaii. There she was, beaming on a beautiful beach, standing next to her boyfriend, now fiancé, with our parents and his family in the background. They had been there for 3 days. I went 3 days without hearing a word from you. Confused and hurt, I opened my banking app. The charges struck me like fists. First-class flights to Honolulu cost $24,800. Grand WEA Resort, 3 ocean view suites for $21,600. Additional expenses include a welcome meal, spa treatments, a sailing excursion, and a private beachside dinner for $12,000. My hands shook as I dialed Mom's number. When she responded, I could hear Hawaiian music and laughter in the background. "Oh honey," she explained casually, "your father and I just decided to take a short break. You're aware of how tough things have been lately? A short break at the Grand WEA with my sister's fiancé's complete family? That kind of break cost more than $58,000 on my credit card." Silence. Muffled voices. Then my sister got on the phone, her remarks oozing with entitlement. "Listen, Miss Executive," she snarled. "You are not required here. You are no longer family, but rather a walking ATM. Nobody wants to hear about your valuable career as we celebrate my engagement." I urged myself to be calm. "That ATM just paid nearly $60,000 for your little party." She laughed coldly. "That's what you're good at, isn't it? Keep doing your fancy job, and we'll enjoy spending your money. It's the only thing you're helpful for." Always was. The call went dead. Within minutes, they had blocked me on all platforms. Mom sent a final message that read, "We're all tired of your negative attitude and jealousy. Please leave us alone. You've spoiled enough precious moments for your sister." Something cold and hard solidified in my chest. My hands remained steady when I accessed my banking app. Each click felt like it broke another link in the chain that had connected me to their torture. Click. Hotel reservations are canceled. Click. Spa packages and excursions are canceled. Click. Return flight tickets have been canceled. Click. Mom's card is permanently deactivated. The aftermath was immediate. My phone burst with calls and messages. "Mom. It's an emergency. Call immediately. Dad says. Fix this quickly. You are embarrassing the family. Sister. You better get this right. Number. Hawaii." The future in-laws, without a doubt. As the hours passed, their tone changed. Mom said, "Sweetie, please, we can talk." Father. "We'll pay you back." Sister. "Stop being so petty, it is my engagement." Then my sister sent out a social media blast. "I can't believe my own sister would spoil the best time of my life. She has always been envious, but this is a new low." Toxic family. Heartbroken. I'd been quiet long enough. I shared everything, screenshots, credit card statements, and messages. The truth about their hidden celebration, unapproved charges, and nasty statements. The tide shifted immediately. People rallied in support as they realized the truth behind their carefully prepared narrative. Mutual friends informed me of the consequences of my acts. My parents needed to borrow money merely to purchase economy flights home. They had to check out of the Grand WEA in front of other visitors. My sister had a temper tantrum in the lobby, which ended up on TikTok. The actual explosion occurred when the fiancé's family discovered they had been caught up in my family's web of deception. They'd been promised a fully compensated luxury holiday, only to find out they were part of a plot to exploit the rich sister. The engagement itself is being called into question, with the fiancé's family questioning the entire arrangement. I am writing this update from my friend Rachel's guest room. The Wilsons have shown their support, reminding me that true family does not treat you like an ATM. I have locked all of my accounts, and my lawyer is drafting cease and desist letters. What is the most difficult part? I don't feel anything. There is no guilt. There's no sadness. Just relief. It's as if I finally laid down a burden I've been carrying my entire life. Perhaps that is what freedom feels like. Update 2. My Hawaii post has had an illuminating impact. What began as a family quarrel has revealed years of deception to a much larger audience than planned. 3 days after my previous post, I received an email from my sister's fiancé's mother. We met in a quiet cafe in Manhattan. "We had no idea," she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Your parents informed us that they were wealthy financial managers, and that your sister was taking a sabbatical from her concert piano career. They stated that this luxury vacation was a gift to both families. She revealed specifics concerning my family's dishonesty. They portrayed themselves as wealthy sophisticates, telling anecdotes about their great occupations and my sister's temporary hiatus from performing. The realization struck their family hard. James is devastated, she continued. Not for the money, but for the lies. He confronted my sister about using my credit cards without authorization. She chuckled and stated, "She's my sister, her money is family money." That evening, James ended their engagement. "I can't build a life with someone who thinks it's okay to steal from and exclude their own sister," he told her. He returned the ring and walked away, his family fully supporting his decision. My sister's reaction was explosive. She recorded a lengthy Instagram live tirade blaming me for losing her chance at happiness, and when that failed to get traction, she began contacting my colleagues, spreading stories about how I abandoned my family during their time of need. However, her efforts backfired. My documented post had already made the rounds. People had seen the credit card statements, read the texts, and recognized the pattern of exploitation. Each fresh attack from her simply strengthened my narrative. My parents' professional consequences has been devastating. Dad's consulting customers began to distance themselves, Mom's social position in her charity circles plummeted, and their carefully cultivated image was broken. They've been trying to reach me via every imaginable method, and the tone of their messages alternates between appealing and demanding. "We are still your parents. You can't just cut us off after all we've done for you. Your sister is devastated. How can you be so cruel? We'll pay you back, just give us time." They showed up at my workplace yesterday. Security turned them away, but not before Mom made a fuss in the lobby, wailing about her ungrateful daughter. My colleagues have been quite sympathetic, with several sharing their own experiences with family financial abuse. The Wilsons have been my rock throughout this. Mrs. Wilson helped me update all of my banking information and set up additional security measures, and Mr. Wilson is aiding me in documenting every unlawful transaction for possible legal action. Rachel's parents offered me their guest house for as long as I needed it. Family doesn't steal from family, Rachel's mom told me. And they certainly don't exclude their own daughter from family celebrations while spending her money. My sister's ex-fiancé's family has been surprisingly supportive, openly defending my actions and sharing their own experiences with my family's dishonesty. Their narrative has helped others understand the full extent of the manipulation. My parents sent me a big envelope today containing a promissory note for the Hawaii expenses, as well as a letter about healing our family bonds and moving forward together. They advised family therapy and regular meals to help re-establish trust. However, there was no acknowledgement of their decades of emotional abuse, or of how they'd methodically abused me while removing me from the family. The letter spoke of misunderstandings, as if $58,000 in illegal charges and a secret family celebration were simple mistakes. I returned the letter unopened, accompanied with a formal cease and desist notification from my lawyer. Some extended family members have attempted to mediate. "They're still your parents," they explain. "Family is family. But here's the thing, they've never treated me like family. I was their housekeeper, their ATM, their backup plan, never their daughter, sister, or true part of the family. I'm tired of being the family bank, the unseen support system, and sacrificing my financial and emotional security for people who see me as nothing more than a resource to be used. For the first time in my life, I am putting myself first. My money is my money, my time is my time, and my life is my life, which is extremely freeing." Update 3. It's been a month since my previous update, and I finally accomplished something I never imagined possible. Full tranquility. 2 weeks ago, my family made their final attempt at reconciliation, arriving to my apartment with photo albums and recital programs. The doorman refused to let them in, but they waited in the lobby for hours. "We just want to remind her of the good times," Mom told the doorman, flipping through images of my sister's performances and pointing out shots where I might be seen in the background, usually hauling equipment or adjusting costumes. Dad attempted to contact my colleagues via LinkedIn. "We're worried about our daughter's mental health," he wrote. "She's cutting off her loving family over a simple misunderstanding about shared finances." My co-workers shared his mails to me, along with comments justifying my behavior. My sister's current social media technique has been to play the victim, creating videos about toxic individualism and how money destroys families, while carefully editing out the unauthorized charges and the secret engagement party. However, the comment sections are brimming with folks who have shared the entire narrative. The final straw came when they contacted the Wilsons to make me see reason. Mr. Wilson responded quickly and emphatically. You've exploited her for years. Leave her alone. I've changed my phone number, shut down my accounts, and even pondered moving to another city. My therapist thinks I'm finally recovering my life, and for the first time in years, I feel liberated. They phoned the Wilsons to help me see reason. Mr. Wilson's response was perfect. For 30 years, I've seen you treat her as nothing more than a convenience. She is finally appreciating herself as she should have been regarded all along. My lawyer has written formal letters requesting payback of all improper transactions, which totaled over $287,000 over 3 years. They claim everything was agreed upon and that I'm rewriting history. The bank's fraud department disagrees, and investigations are still ongoing. I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building, my mail has been routed through a screening agency, my phone number has changed, my email has rigorous filters, and my social media profiles have been cancelled or made private. Last week, I was offered a partnership track position, and the managing partner commented that my management of the family problem demonstrated the kind of backbone they look for in a leader. Without the continual drain of family expectations, I've been able to focus on my profession. Rachel's parents have informally adopted me. I have standing Sunday dinner invitations, and her mother keeps accidentally cooking too much food. They urge that I attend their annual Cape Cod vacation. Real family vacations don't involve stealing, Rachel's father quipped as we organized the trip. Mrs. Wilson has been helping me rediscover abandoned interests, and I've started taking photography classes, which I couldn't do in high school because it would have clashed with my sister's practice schedule. The Wilsons are still my steady mentors. The extended family is still pushing for reconciliation. But what about the holidays? What happens when your parents are older? These queries used to make me feel guilty. Now they just remind me of how one-sided our relationship was. My therapist pointed out that my family's behavior follows a common pattern of financial abuse, which is veiled by cultural expectations of familial obligation. You're not breaking family bonds, I was told. You're breaking free from exploitation. The most significant shift has occurred internally. The worry that used to follow every phone contact, email, and bank alert has vanished. I no longer flinch when my phone calls or feel terrible about spending my own money on myself. Last weekend, I bought an abstract painting that spoke to me, and as I hung it, I realized it was the first time I had bought something solely for myself, rather than for someone else. My sister's most recent post accuses me of being callous for abandoning family. Nevertheless, I have not abandoned family. Rather, I have discovered my true family. It's Rachel's parents asking about my day, and they mean it. It's the Wilsons honoring my accomplishments without expecting anything in return. My coworkers are the ones who never hesitate to defend me. Sometimes I think of that little girl who ironed concert dresses and made dinners to get attention, and I wish I could tell her she deserved more. That being useful is not synonymous with being loved. The real family does not treat you like an ATM. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a support system. I am not a resource to be used. I am free. Now to the next story 5. My sister-in-law's DNA kit to ruin my marriage backfired when her son's test revealed shocking truths about her own family. I met my husband James, in our late 20s, and we soon fell in love. We married after 2 years of dating and have had a lovely and quiet life together ever since. We welcomed our gorgeous kid, Nathan, and felt like the ideal family. I felt nothing could separate us until Sarah, my sister-in-law, decided to poke her nose into our life. Sarah and I have never gotten along. From the minute James introduced me to her, it was evident that we were not going to get along. I'm not saying I didn't try, but Sarah made no effort to care. She accused me of wanting to overshadow her at her wedding because I was dressed in a cream-colored gown. To clarify, Sarah intentionally chose cream-colored outfits for all of her bridesmaids. However, on her special day, it became about me stealing her spotlight. From then on, it was a never-ending game of sarcastic remarks, backhanded compliments, and petty behavior. If I wore a new dress, Sarah would say, "It's cute, but I liked it better when I saw it in the store last year." If Nathan accomplished something, she'd minimize it by comparing him to her own son, Tommy. Despite this, James and I always attempted to ignore Sarah's petty behavior. We wanted Nathan and Tommy to grow up as close as siblings. Things, however, took a nasty turn this past Christmas when Sarah decided to create havoc in an unexpected way. For Christmas, she gave Nathan one of those popular DNA test kits. At first, I didn't think much about it. Nathan has always been interested in science and enjoyed knowing about his family history. Nonetheless, it was not a typical present for a child. That night, James approached me privately. He told me Sarah had made some weird, almost cryptic comments to him, such as "It's about time you got some answers," and "The truth always comes out." It didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. Nathan has green eyes, whereas James and I have brown ones. Of course, anyone with a basic understanding of genetics is aware that recessive features such as green eyes can pass down through generations. But Sarah had been making subtle, passive-aggressive statements for years, implying that James might not be Nathan's father. I was infuriated. Not only was she awful to us, but she was also involved with my son. We agreed to allow Nathan to take the test if he wanted to, knowing that the findings would confirm what we already knew. Nathan is our son, and the test would reveal nothing more. Nathan was enthusiastic about the science underlying the DNA test. He was excited to learn about his lineage and family roots, so we assisted him with the process, and he completed the test. Meanwhile, Sarah's son, Tommy, had been observing everything with great curiosity. Tommy, a curious 14-year-old, decided he wanted to take a DNA test too. Sarah's husband, Todd, thought it would make a good family activity, so they got a kit for him as well. What began as harmless curiosity quickly escalated into a family nightmare. Nathan received his results a few weeks later. Everything was as expected. James was clearly his father. But then we got the shock of our lives. When Tommy's results arrived, it was discovered that Todd was not his biological father. Sarah had an affair, and Tommy was not Todd's child. Todd was devastated. He had reared Tommy as his own, unaware that Sarah had been unfaithful. To make matters worse, Todd sought a paternity test for their younger daughter, who was just 7. The results confirmed his greatest fears. He wasn't her father either. Sarah's life was collapsing in front of her eyes, and it was not a quiet or private collapse. The entire family found out, and the consequences were harsh. Todd filed for divorce and left the house within a few days. The irony of the situation was hard to ignore. Sarah's attempt to undermine my marriage exposed her own lies. Tommy was the person who suffered the most. Nathan was also infected. He and Tommy had always been close, and seeing his cousin suffer through this upset him terribly. He began asking questions about why Tommy's father was no longer present, and it hurt my heart to hear how concerned he was for his cousin. Sarah's life deteriorated over time. Todd pressed for full custody of the children, seeking to limit Sarah's involvement in their lives. Sarah was a wreck at family gatherings, with a pale face and red eyes from crying. She appeared defeated. Sarah contacted me one day and requested assistance. She wanted me to talk to Todd and persuade him to lighten off on the custody agreement. She was trying to save what was left of her relationship with her children and turned to me for advice. At first, I was stunned. How could she have the arrogance to ask for my help after everything she had done to destroy my marriage and cause havoc at every opportunity? At first, I ignored her calls and refused to aid her. But as the days passed, I found myself wondering about Tommy. He was the real victim in all of this. Despite the fact that none of it was his fault, he bore the brunt of the pain. James, of course, warned me to keep out of it. He was confident Sarah had made her bed and would now have to lie in it. Part of me wondered whether I could help the youngsters involved find some serenity. It was not their fault that their mother made poor decisions. So I'm at a crossroads, confused about what to do. Should I help Sarah or let her suffer the repercussions of her actions? What would you do in my position? Update 1. I wanted to provide an update on what has occurred since my previous post, and I hope it puts some light on the complex situation we are dealing with. Sarah continues phoning me, and it's becoming exhausting. I expected her to cool down or back off soon, but she hasn't. She's relentless. On one especially horrible day, she called me 3 times in a row, leaving lengthy, sobbing voicemails. I could hear the despair in her voice, but I couldn't feel much pity. At one point, my husband James became so frustrated that he couldn't take it anymore. He called her himself. James rarely loses his temper, so when he called, I knew things had gotten out of hand. From across the room, I could hear his voice as he snapped, telling her he was tired of her insulting me and manipulating our family. After that chat, things became worse. Sarah's tone changed again. She began sending me multiple text messages, alternating between pleading for my assistance and accusing me of attempting to ruin her life. She was pleading for my help, telling me how much she wanted me to talk to Todd and repair things. The next thing I knew, she was calling me manipulative, alleging I was jealous of her and her family and intended to destroy her marriage. Throughout all, my main focus has been the children. They are innocent in all of this, but they are suffering the most. I can't quit thinking about Tommy and Nathan. Tommy's real father's identity must have been traumatic to him, and it's evident he's having difficulty processing it. It's difficult for me to see him suffer through this without being able to help. Nathan, on the other hand, isn't sure what's going on but feels something isn't right. We have explained it to him, but he is still too young to understand anything. We had a family gathering a few days ago, and Nathan wanted to play with Tommy like he did before. They used to be quite close, inseparable actually. However, when Tommy arrived, he was distant, quiet, and scarcely engaged with Nathan. Nathan wanted to play with him, but I had to make excuses, explaining that Tommy was weary. Meanwhile, Sarah continues to write me these long, theatrical notes. She messaged me yesterday, stating she felt betrayed by our family. I don't see how someone who was unfaithful might feel betrayed, yet she still appears unable to accept responsibility for her actions. It's always someone else's fault, mine, James's, Todd's, and never hers. James believes we should step in and assist Tommy, especially because he and Nathan are so close. However, he is also concerned about the ramifications of being too involved in Sarah's situation. We've been trying to strike a delicate balance between supporting the children and maintaining our personal tranquility, but it's been more difficult than we expected. Todd has begun to contact James, further complicating the situation. He's been trying to figure out what happened and wanted to chat about it. James reluctantly agreed to meet him for coffee. When he returned, he appeared more conflicted than ever. Todd is naturally devastated. He told James that he feels like his entire life has been a lie, and he is now trying to figure out how to co-parent with Sarah after everything that has occurred. Talking with Todd simply made James feel more torn. Todd is a kind man, who is only trying to do his best for his children, despite his awful situation. After hearing Todd's point of view, James feels even more divided about how to proceed. He wants to help, but we both know that getting too involved will drag us deeper into Sarah's chaos. It's difficult to determine what the appropriate decision is. Every time I see Tommy, I have an intense desire to help him. He's simply a child caught up in this mess, and he doesn't deserve it. Nathan continues asking why Tommy always appears so sad, and it kills my heart that I can't give him an honest reason. The more I think about it, the more divided I am between wanting to intervene and being terrified of being drawn into Sarah's tumultuous world. At the end of the day, all I want is to safeguard the kids. Tommy and Nathan deserve more, and it hurts to see them suffer as a result of their parents' sins. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hoping we can find a way to resolve this without causing further harm. I'll keep you updated on what occurs, and once again, thank you for your ongoing support. Update 2. A lot has transpired in the last several days, so brace yourself. It's been a lot for all of us, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. First and foremost, Sarah chose to proceed with an official medical paternity test. She was dissatisfied with the results of the home DNA kit, arguing it was not a reputable source for making such a critical decision. To be fair, home tests have a margin of error, and I suppose she was hanging on to what little hope she had left. However, the results did not change. The medical paternity test verified the previous one's results. Todd is not Tommy's or his daughter's father. Sarah simply dug herself an even deeper hole. I was not surprised by the conclusion, but there was no space for uncertainty. Todd, in particular, appeared to be bracing himself for the worst, yet when the medical results arrived, I could tell he was still devastated. He appeared crushed, as if the last fiber of hope he'd been holding on to had been wrenched away. He had previously told James that he didn't expect any miracles, but there was always a small part of him that hoped the test was incorrect. Todd became more withdrawn after receiving the news. Todd apparently began researching after obtaining the results and tracked down the individual with whom Sarah was allegedly having an affair. Todd told James that this man was Sarah's coworker. He had suspected their relationship for a long time, but Sarah always dismissed it, claiming it was only work-related. Todd now understood everything. He remembered Sarah and this man being abnormally close, attending work parties together and messaging late into the night. She was continuously making explanations, assuring Todd that it was something innocent. But suddenly it seemed that all of our suspicions were being confirmed. Todd decided to face him. He traced him down to his residence and entered without alerting anyone. Todd, according to what I learned later, was not in a healthy mental state. He was upset, angry, and searching for answers. Things suddenly got out of control. The man initially disputed everything, but Todd refused to accept it. It quickly escalated into a shouting confrontation, and it wasn't long before it became physical. Neighbors heard the disturbance and phoned the cops. By the time authorities arrived, Todd and the man had been bruised. Todd was arrested for assault and now faces prosecution. It's a mess. James had to travel to the police station to assist Todd. He posted bond, but Todd is now facing major legal issues. He claims that the fight was provoked, but this will be difficult to prove in court. This whole thing is spiraling out of hand, and I can't help but believe it's all because of Sarah's decision to keep the truth hidden for so long. Todd is breaking down, and it's heartbreaking to witness someone who was always so collected break down like this. Meanwhile, Sarah is urgently trying to contain the damage, but it is far too late. Todd has petitioned for full custody of the children. Sarah is in a panic. She's trying to persuade everyone that Todd is the problem, referring to him as a psychopath and citing the fight as proof of his instability and danger. She's frightened Todd will take the kids away, and she's lashing out at everybody who doesn't support her. Todd has been talking of moving to another state with the kids to put some distance between them and Sarah. He believes the children deserve a fresh start away from the mayhem. But I am not sure. I appreciate his desire to protect kids, but separating them from everything they know could be more harmful than beneficial. Legally, it will be a difficult battle. When I last saw Sarah, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she kept saying that everything was coming apart, that everyone was attempting to take her children away. It seemed as if she were experiencing a panic attack. Even so, she continues to regard herself as the victim in all of this. At this point, I believe we have no choice but to become involved. We're already caught up in this mess, whether we like it or not. James believes we should back Todd and assist him with the legal issues he is experiencing, especially since Todd appears to be the more stable father in all of this, which I think is a great idea. I'll keep you posted as things go, but for the time being, we're simply holding on and hoping for a resolution that doesn't absolutely wreck these children's lives. Update 3. I have a lot to say regarding all that has transpired since my last post. First, let's discuss Todd and the man Sarah had an affair with. You already know how Todd was detained after the confrontation became physical. Initially, we believed Todd might face significant assault charges, but the man opted not to press charges. Todd told us that this man wants to disassociate himself from the entire affair. He undoubtedly realized that getting engaged may make matters worse for him, both personally and professionally. Although this individual admitted to the affair when the police arrived, he has since severed relations with both Todd and Sarah. In some ways, that chapter of the story has come to an end, which I believe is for the best. Todd does not need to continue battling with someone who clearly has no regard for the consequences of his actions. Many people have questioned me about Tommy's sister and why I haven't said more about her. She's like Nathan, she's been informed what's going on but doesn't completely comprehend it. Outwardly, she does not appear to be as impacted. Deep down, I believe she is mourning in her own way, but she has not voiced it as much as Tommy has. Tommy is older and more mature, so he understands what's going on, and it appears to be hitting him harder. That's why I've focused more on him, even though both children are plainly victims of their mother's behavior. James and I are here to support both of them, regardless of who their parents are. Tommy's situation has deteriorated significantly. Some students at his school have started bullying him, which has resulted in fights. It doesn't help that Sarah is flooding his mind with beliefs that everything is his father's fault. Tommy knows his mother cheated on Todd and that Todd is not his real father. Despite this, Sarah has told him she did it because Todd was mean to her. This demonstrates that she would sooner ruin and divide her family than fight for it. That is, in my opinion, an awful thing to say. Todd, thus far, has fought for his children. All he wants is to get away from Sarah, which anyone can understand given how manipulative, devious, and unfaithful she is. I don't understand how the person who caused so much pain and turmoil can portray herself as a victim while continuing to damage the lives of others. But I suppose it's in her nature. She did what she did because she is a horrible person who would continue to act this way to the end, hoping to gain something from it all to make herself feel better. This is yet another reason why James and I believe a child should not grow up with an unfaithful parent. It is the worst possible model and influence for proper upbringing. We hope Todd gets complete custody because if Tommy continues to be affected by his mother, things will not go well for him. His younger sister will suffer considerably more because she is still young and does not completely comprehend what is going on. Over time, Sarah is likely to manipulate her and turn her against Todd. There's also a potential she'll end up acting like Sarah, believing her actions weren't that horrible and blaming others. At this time, both James and I are completely on Todd's side, and the children's as well. First, Todd truly wants to be a good father to them, but we also believe that neither Sarah nor the original father is what the children need. Their best hope right now is with Todd, and we'll help all three of them in any way we can. Even the whole of James' family, including my in-laws, is on Todd's side. Sarah's parents are not pleased with what she has done. For example, the other day, we chose not to attend a family gathering. On the one hand, we had another commitment, but we also wanted to escape the turmoil surrounding Sarah, and it was hard to watch Nathan go through everything Tommy is going through. At the occasion, Sarah began with her customary monologue, attempting to portray Todd as the story's villain. But my father-in-law intervened and told her to stop because she was only inflicting more harm and sorrow to everyone. He pointed at Tommy, who was sitting across the room, and asked, "Don't you understand the consequences of your mistakes? Don't you see how you're still hurting everyone? Your children, and we, do not deserve this. Accept your mistakes and behave maturely." My mother-in-law then went on to say that she had not trained her to act this way and hoped her granddaughter would not follow in her footsteps. Sarah threatened to leave the event with the children, but no one in the family supported her decision. My father-in-law said she could leave if she wished, but the grandchildren would stay. He told her that both kids needed to stay away from the commotion she had started and was still causing around her, and that he would bring them back later. Sarah left, and the children stayed to play. Later, my father-in-law called Todd to invite him to spend the day with them, and he didn't hesitate. My father-in-law reported the kids seemed considerably better, but it wasn't a miracle cure. Still, being separated from their mother is the greatest thing for them right now because her poison is hurting them, something no one in the family wants, except, obviously, Sarah. Sarah doesn't appear to care about her children, only about how she is seen and not losing anything. A true mother would not use these games to harm her children. Instead, she would endeavor to protect them from everything. However, a mother would not have cheated on her spouse. Still, here we are. Update 4. With the newest developments involving my sister-in-law and her children, better times are on the horizon for this family. To begin, my sister-in-law discovered Todd had been invited to my in-laws' house after she had departed, and she was not pleased. She went to my in-laws' house and challenged them because she believes they should be on her side rather than Todd's. My in-laws stated that they would always side with the children in this case, and that if Todd was beneficial to them, they would support him. This, in some ways, fueled Sarah's rage. After shouting, she grabbed an item from the front garden and flung it at her parents' car window. To summarize, it's a distinct issue. My father-in-law sued her, and she had to pay for the window. I mention this because it is relevant to the custody case later on. Todd's divorce went fairly smoothly. There was ample evidence that Sarah had been unfaithful, therefore Todd came out top in the divorce. However, no one really wins in a divorce, especially one prompted by infidelity. At the very least, Sarah could not take any more from Todd than she already had. I wouldn't say it was easy to obtain full custody of the children. Quite the reverse. But I'll tell you what happened. Todd won. It wasn't simple because Todd is not the children's biological father. He did, however, succeed after months of judicial proceedings. Some family members, including James and my in-laws, testified to Sarah's character. The car window incident did not help her case, nor did the fact that the judge was willing to contemplate handing complete custody to the father rather than the mother, which is unusual. The final nail in the coffin was the biological father's actions. This father simply showed up for selfish reasons. To avoid paying Sarah's child support if she had custody of the children. Sarah no longer has custody, so she has no grounds to sue him because she has no child-related expenses. I'm not sure Todd can demand anything from his biological father, but he hasn't indicated to us he intends to. According to my understanding, the biological father formally gave up his parental rights, as if it were an adoption. I'd like to add that I haven't followed every aspect of the case, so this is only my basic idea. The crucial issue here is that Todd has custody of both children. This has already begun to have results, particularly for Tommy and his sister, who have started therapy. Sarah can see her children, but only with supervision. My in-laws, on the other hand, can see the kids anytime they want, as long as Todd makes the decision, and so can we. This has also benefited Nathan, who is now able to play with Tommy as previously. There is still much work to be done, but things are gradually returning to normal, which is all that matters. I'm not sure what to tell you about Sarah. I haven't had much communication with her in a while. I blocked her and haven't heard anything from her since. She sends sporadic messages to her parents and James, but their relationship is pretty icy right now, and I'm not sure if it will ever change. Now to the next story 6. My siblings received luxurious gifts, but I received body wash for our birthdays. Now that I'm moving out, everything is coming apart. I am a 25-year-old woman living with my parents. I have 2 siblings, Joseph and Katrina. As the oldest, I was the first to begin employment. For a long period, just my father and I worked to support the family. My mother was either ill or too weary to work. Over the years, I've realized that her condition is self-inflicted. She would rather sit on the couch all day, watching TV and overeating than work. I gave up trying to convince her to start working a long time ago. My brother and sister began working shortly after finishing school. Unfortunately, they were unable to hold their jobs for long. My brother was a robber, and my sister blamed her lack of employment on her mental condition. The temporary financial comfort we felt when they started working did not endure. I eventually had to take on additional shifts at work, knowing I couldn't rely on them. I worked hard to move forward in my company. Now, I make more than most individuals my age. Many people compliment me on my accomplishments, yet I feel like an imposter when I look back. I have not done anything for myself. 70% of my earnings goes toward home expenses, leaving me with only 30%. That quantity barely meets my needs. On top of that, there is always an unforeseen expense at the end of the month that I must cover. I work so much that I rarely come home, and when I do, it's a nightmare. At least I get paid for my job, but no one pays me to clean the house. I need to clean, do laundry, wash dishes, and make sure we have adequate groceries. My mother and sister barely contribute. My mother spends the entire day watching television, whilst my sister locks herself in her room and only comes out to hang out with her friends or get into trouble. I can't ask my father or brother for aid because they adhere to traditional gender norms. This is the type of family I come from. Although I disagreed with those ideals, I felt I had no choice because I was living in their home. Every time I tried to speak up, my mother told me to find my own place. She understands that I cannot afford my own house while also supporting the family. She also considers my heart is too sensitive to leave them to fend for themselves, or so she believes. None of this is the reason I am writing this piece. It isn't even the reason I'm so frustrated. My frustration stems from the fact that my parents have once again demonstrated their preference for my brothers over me. It was my birthday 2 days ago. My gift? Body wash. Yes, body wash. You might think I am ungrateful, but Katrina celebrated her birthday last month. She had a lavish surprise party that we couldn't afford. I had to take on more consulting work to help pay for it. This came after my father said he had enough money to pay for the party after I initially declined. After the party, he approached me with a sob tale about miscalculating expenses. He also told me that he had borrowed from bad people and was frightened they would harm us. To protect my family, I chose to pay for the party. I was very disappointed because they constantly do this. Whether it's a holiday or a birthday, they always prioritize my siblings' gifts before my own. This year, my brother received a new gaming system as a gift, while my sister received a certificate for our city's most costly spa. And me, I received body wash. After everything I've done for this family, is body wash all I deserve? I'm not sure why, but this time I was rather offended. Every time they did this, I found a method to get around it. I persuaded myself they didn't mean it, that they adored and valued me. However, I believe it is time to quit telling myself lies. That body wash was the final straw. I exploded after receiving it. I was unable to restrain myself. I got a tremendous lump in my throat, and my wrath overtook me. I asked them why I couldn't throw a big celebration like Katrina and Joseph. All I got was body shampoo, not even a good cake. My father became enraged and asked why I was being so disrespectful when I understood their financial predicament. At that point, I began laughing and asked him how he could say it with a straight face. He was the one who went into debt to ensure Katrina had a spectacular birthday celebration, but he couldn't afford more than $20 for mine. I was tired of being treated differently. At that point, I had to inquire whether I was adopted. Is that why they treated me like a stranger? I work hard at my job, come home, and take care of everyone, but all I receive is body wash. They must be kidding. My mother started crying at that point, saying she hated it when I had these little outbursts. So it's all right for her to have emotions, but when I display mine, I'm disrespectful to the family? That is exactly what I interpreted from her comment. She has hundreds of various emotions during the day, and we are expected to tolerate them. But if I get outraged over something legitimate, I'm labeled theatrical. Fine. I decided to quit arguing and go to my room. When they tried calling, I pretended to be asleep. I sat there for the entire time, just thinking. I was really unhappy. Even though I keep myself busy all the time, I am unable to fall asleep. My thoughts center on how sad I am. Most people my age are buying their first car, getting married, or purchasing a home. I see some of them at work doing just that. Even though they earn less than me, I am envious. Despite being ahead in my job, I am far behind in life. I have no identity or purpose in this world. My only purpose is to serve these ungrateful people. Now that I think about it, how did I allow them to treat me this way? It had been going on for so long that I had no idea they were taking advantage of me. My thoughts on this have grown extremely apparent as a result of the event with my birthday gift. Now I understand I don't want things to stay this way forever. Something needs to change. I feel like I'm accomplishing nothing with my life, and I'd like to know what I can do to alter that, to have my own purpose. Update 1. I did it. I moved out 2 months after my original post. I can't believe I moved out only 2 months after the birthday incident. My apartment is small and sparsely furnished, but it is mine. Do you want to know the first thing I did after I finished moving? I lay in my bed for hours, with no one phoning me to repair any minor issue. It was an odd sensation. I had no idea that resting in bed could be so cathartic. You're undoubtedly wondering how I moved, especially given my controlling family. It was not easy, but I completed it. First, I took their counsel and began setting boundaries. I merely paid the bare minimum for household bills and saved the remainder. I also took on more shifts at work and saved the money. When my parents inquired about the money, I explained that it would be included in my year-end bonus. It was difficult, but as soon as I gathered enough for the deposit, I told them to go to hell and moved into my new apartment. Once I had picked which apartment to rent, I informed my parents that I was leaving. It wasn't a pleasant conversation. They were enraged and inquired whether living with them was indeed that horrible. I assured them it wasn't about them, but about me. I was getting older and needed to get more independence. I couldn't do it if I kept living with them. Besides, Mom had always said I should get my own apartment. Of course, my mother was offended by my reply and labeled it snarky. She claimed to want only the best for me, but I mocked everything she said. I realized I couldn't win that fight, so I apologized and went on. My family was very resistant to my desire to emigrate, but there was nothing they could do. I'd already signed my lease and was prepared to go. In protest, none of them helped me pack. I had to approach a couple coworkers for assistance. Janet and Lisa, two acquaintances from separate divisions at work, were the only ones who were aware of my predicament at home. When I told them I was relocating, they jumped for delight. When I requested for aid with the move, they were more than happy to help. We completed transferring everything a few days ago, and now I am in my practically empty apartment. I don't have much, yet I'm satisfied. I can't wait to start living independently. Update 2, I've been living in my apartment for more than a month. It's been a tough month, but I'm happier than ever, or was until a few hours ago. Let me quickly recap what transpired over the last month. I've been furnishing my flat and even had a housewarming party. Also, now that I have my evenings free, I've begun to get out with friends and even meet new individuals through them. It is wonderful to finally have a social life after so long without one. Honestly, I think I'm finally living for myself. Aside from developing a social life, I've started dating someone Lisa introduced me to. In the past, I never went out with anyone since I didn't have time. My family was continuously disrupting my plans with some sort of emergency. But now that I live farther away, they can't do that. You're probably wondering how my connection with my family has fared over the last month. Actually, none of them had messaged me at all throughout this time. They've been unusually quiet, which has been disconcerting at times. I considered messaging them, but I stopped myself. I feel like I'm usually the one to break the ice and apologize after our disagreements. I do not want to be that way anymore. I want to be treated with the same respect as any other member of the family. So I opted not to reach out. For a while, I felt our relationship had ended. That was until my mother contacted me this afternoon when I was at work. I was astonished to see her name on the screen, but I responded. As soon as I picked up, she asked, "Where's the check?" At first, I was perplexed because I had no idea what check she was referring to. Had she forgotten that I wasn't living with them anymore? What were her thoughts? Anyway, she wondered how I expected them to function without my assistance. I told her that she had 2 healthy, capable children who could help pay the expenses. They've had a month to look for work. What have they been doing during that time? She then questioned how I could be so inconsiderate to my siblings' plight. So I questioned her how I could feel sympathy for a criminal and a lazy girl. They damaged their own job possibilities. Couldn't they learn from me and persevere? I told my mother that I was not going to send anything and that they needed to make their own plans. Then I hung up. She contacted me numerous more times, but I did not respond. Later, my father called and tried to reprimand me, but I hung up. I couldn't believe what I had done. I had never cut someone off while they were speaking before. But, to be honest, the last month has been so tranquil, and reconnecting with them has reminded me of how tumultuous my life once was. I don't think I want to upset my peace by reintroducing them into my life. I wish they had remained silent. They should have cut me off and left me alone because, in reality, I was never actually a part of the family. Now I see that they only wanted me for as long as I could provide for them. I was living an unsustainable lifestyle because I was always there to support others. But now that's over. I have hit my limit. It is time for me to focus on myself. I should have done this long ago. They have attempted to make me feel bad, but it isn't working. I believe it's because I'm now immune to it. Update 3. Honestly, I'm not sure what's wrong with my family. I can't believe I am related to such strange individuals. I knew they were capable of going to extremes to achieve their goals, but this is too much. I'm not going to be patient with them after this. They're about to witness a side of me they didn't realize existed. It had been 2 days since my relatives began pestering me for money. I've repeatedly told them that I'm not giving them anything, they need to devise their own plan. If they can't pay their bills, how can they expect me to support them when I already have my own expenses? It's totally irresponsible and irrational. I've been ignoring them for the past 24 hours, concentrating on purchasing additional furnishings for my flat. It's finally beginning to look like a house, and I'm really pleased with myself. I can't believe I now have items to call my own. Unfortunately, I can't truly appreciate this success because they've been so obnoxious. I've ignored them the entire time, which is presumably why they decided to come to my residence. Yes, they came to my flat last night while I was hosting a little gathering. Here's what happened. Yesterday was a Friday night, and a few of my pals wanted to go out. But I was too exhausted. Lisa and Janet agreed, so we planned a book and wine night at my apartment. 2 more girls joined us, and we were having a terrific time, until there was a disturbance outside the door. I live in a quiet apartment community, so this was concerning. We attempted to ignore it, but it became louder and soon reached my door. When I opened it, my sister, father, and brother were arguing with the building manager. They demanded to be allowed into my apartment since they were family. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I informed the manager that I knew them, but they were not welcome. My father looked hurt and claimed he only wanted to talk. I asked him to look at the time, which was 10 p.m. I informed them that if they wanted to see me, they could have called ahead. Also, how did they know where I lived? That's when my sister stepped in, stating she learned from a friend who had seen me at the complex. Then she looked around and noted that I was living large. She asked why she couldn't live with me. I looked at her like she was insane. Why would I want to live with someone who is so lazy? I would have to feed her and clean up after her. I have not forgotten the dynamics of the previous few years. I told them to go because they were not welcome, particularly at that hour. My father refused, saying they wouldn't go unless I spoke with them. I informed him that I was not interested in talking, especially since I had guests. Then my brother began ranting at the top of his lungs, addressing my friends and calling me a useless sister. He then forced his way into my flat and started verbally assaulting me. Between him, my sister, and my father, I felt completely overwhelmed. Meanwhile, my friends sat stunned, watching this horrific show. Things only got worse. My father and brother began rifling through my belongings and turning them upside down. I cried because I saw them treat my possessions so disrespectfully. I implored them to stop, but they did not listen. They said I was to blame and demanded a check. That is, until security arrived. It turned out that Janet had gone to contact security as soon as my father and brother began disrupting the calm. When security arrived, my father and brother refused to go and attempted to resist. That was a major mistake since the uproar became so loud that they had to call the cops. My father and brother are currently in jail for trespassing in my flat and disrupting the peace. They will not be released until Monday, and I have already filed charges. I am bringing them to court over this. They've gone too far, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. This marks the end. They've gone too far, and I'm not going to let them drag me farther into their mess. Update 4. I wanted to post an update sooner because it has been 4 months, but I chose to wait until everything was resolved. Now that the trial has ended, I can finally tell you everything. I think many of you will be relieved to know that my family received what they deserved. Starting with my brother, the judge was harsh on him because he had previously shoplifted and is a repeat offender. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Unfortunately, this will remain on his record, making it even more difficult for him to establish a future for himself. But, honestly, given the way he's been spending his life, he had little chance. I'm hoping that his time in jail would straighten him out and help him set priorities. I've seen folks considerably younger than him who have significantly more structured lives. My father had to pay a fee to the court and is currently on probation. If he even receives a traffic ticket, he's done. He needs to be really cautious for a time. Otherwise, he'll wind himself in jail. Both the judge and the city take these transgressions very seriously, which is why they have met with severe punishments. Now, about my mother. Years of gluttony and idleness have now caught up with her. She is at high risk of heart disease due to her poor lifestyle. Because of how quickly her health is deteriorating, doctors estimate she has less than 2 years if she does not make radical adjustments. Knowing her, she probably doesn't care because she believes she will live forever. I tried for years to convince her to eat healthier, but she never listened, so I gave up. If her high cholesterol does not kill her, my sister most likely will. Speaking of my sister, she's been the talk of the town lately, and not for the right reasons. Since money has been tight and no one is funding her lifestyle longer, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She somehow became acquainted with the wrong crowd, girls who were rumored to be selling certain items on the street corner. It is both unlawful and highly harmful. I heard about a week ago that she had been detained for doing something questionable. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends herself in a physically perilous situation as a result of her chosen route. People have asked me to speak with her, but she chose this life. Honestly, she probably thinks I'm stupid for working an honest job. No insult to anyone in that business, but I've witnessed what some of these girls go through. There is no happy ending in sight for her, only substance misuse, additional jail term, and perilous situations. My mother has fallen multiple times as a result of the stress that Katrina has caused. But Katrina still lives with our parents, so they are enabling her conduct by allowing her to be there. Even though she is making money, she is definitely not spending it appropriately or paying her responsibilities. You are undoubtedly wondering how I know all this. I found out from a credible source. My parents are now receiving food stamps, and my father's working hours have been decreased. He spends most of his time at home, with my mother and Katrina. I can only imagine how hungry everyone must be in that house right now. But it isn't all for them. In addition, they must compensate for the damage they caused to my flat. I was able to recover the items they damaged, but they still need to pay the money the judge ordered. I feel sad for them, but not enough to intervene and help. It's what it is. They made their decisions, and now they must live with the consequences. Update 5. I have an update on several recent events, and the truth is that my family is falling deeper into the troubles that, as I frequently repeat, they made for themselves. They are the type of people who try to dig themselves out of a hole. I'm not sure if there is a way back for them, but I do know that it is not my obligation to get them out of the holes they've dug themselves. And they keep getting deeper. To begin with, my father, who was supposed to pay for the damage he and my brother committed in my apartment, just did not do it. Many of the comments I received in my last update predicted this outcome, and they were correct. The worst part is that this time he didn't even try. He made no effort to demonstrate his willingness to comply with the judge's instruction. However, the judge was correct when he cautioned that any failure would result in his return to prison. A sneeze may land him in jail, which is exactly what occurred. It wasn't a real sneeze, but the fact that he didn't pay what was ordered resulted in a trip to jail. I discovered a few days ago that he is currently serving time there. The irony of the situation is that my father was, in theory, the only one working in that house. I'm not sure how my mother will cope without him now that he's in prison. The last time I spoke with someone close to the family, they said there was almost no food in the house. Given my mother's health issues, this is really frightening. But, to be honest, all I feel is a frigid remoteness from the entire thing. For years, I was the one who kept that house afloat, and they emotionally and financially abused me. They are now paying the price for their own recklessness. On top of that, my mother is alone in the house, not only because my father is in jail, but also because my brother and sister are now behind bars. My brother had already been in jail for a while, as you may recall, but now my sister has joined him. Yes, her business venture ended just as expected. She was arrested. Everyone saw it coming, except her. Her condition worsened when she began using in addition to selling, leaving her even more vulnerable and without much judgment. An undercover detective caught her in the act, putting an end to her attempt to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle. Now she's awaiting trial, but I don't think she'll come out unscathed. The worst aspect is that she cannot afford professional counsel, therefore she is represented by a public defender. I do not mean to be unkind, but I do not see much hope for her. As for my mother, I honestly don't know what will happen to her life now. She is staying in the house that previously housed 5 people, but it is now completely empty. My father is in prison, my sister is awaiting trial, and my brother has already served time. The house is emptied, and the saddest thing is that she has no one to care for her. For years, she did nothing but rely on others to bring her money and food. She can scarcely leave the house anymore due to her health difficulties. I'm not sure how she'll survive. I know they get food stamps, but that isn't enough to survive on. In short, my family has entirely disintegrated. All I have left is my peace, and while it may sound harsh, I do not regret having removed myself. Update 6. I feel horrible for having to deliver bad news, but it's no longer my bad news, it's my family's. Despite the fact that everything is unfolding in slow motion, I can't help but feel relieved that I am not personally involved in this disaster. To begin, I have finally regained my money. It wasn't an easy process, and as expected, my father didn't have the money to pay me. The only reason Dad ultimately did was because my mother had to take out a loan to bail him out of jail. The fact that my father was in jail for contempt made matters even more problematic, but she eventually received the money after considerable work. Of course, it was not her own idea, but rather my mother's desperate desire to get my father out of jail. My father's release from jail is arguably the only bright aspect of this predicament. During this period, my mother had been living with a relative while attempting to resolve my father's legal issues. She left the house for an extended period of time, and as one might imagine, it was abandoned. Now, the neighborhood we lived in was never ideal, particularly for leaving a house unsecured. Apparently, it has been vandalized and completely looted. The most worrisome aspect is that according to what I've been informed, there are people living there now. People who, from what I understand, may be previous clients of my sister. The fact that people are squatting within the house is only the beginning of the problem. Still, if my parents are able to remove them, which I doubt will be easy, I'm not sure whether what remains is still a house. It bothers me to think about the state of the place I once called home, especially since I put so much time and effort into keeping it up when I was still living there. But at the end of the day, it is no longer my home. It's not in my name, and it's not my responsibility to solve it. My parents will have to face this on their own. My siblings continue to serve their sentences. There have been little updates on that front. What surprises me the most about all of this is how quickly the situation deteriorated after my departure. It's as if my departure was the final nail in the coffin of a scenario that was already decaying from within. Now to the next story. 7. My boyfriend dumped me over red flags his best friend made up. He begged to return, but I made him confront her before cutting him off. I, 23F, had been with my boyfriend Eric, 24M, for about 8 months. Eric had never had a long-term relationship before, and most of his ex-girlfriends were flings that lasted only 3 or 4 months. Naturally, I love to believe that this relationship was meaningful for him. But a few days ago, I discovered that may not be the case. Eric's best buddy, Olivia, 24F, has been his neighbor for more than 14 years. They met when they were 10 years old and have remained inseparable since. They attended the same school, college, and now work in the same place. When I say best friend, I mean it. Eric never does anything without consulting Olivia first. Even the decision to date me was not totally his own. He later told me that every lady he'd ever dated had to get Olivia's approval first. If Olivia asked him to end the relationship, he would. I believe this explains why his previous relationships failed. Eric only told me about this 4 months into our relationship, stating he believed it was time. I had already become strongly attached to him, so I chose to stay. Yes, I understand, bad decision. If I had known about his unusual need for Olivia sooner, I would not have gone on a first date with him. My relationship with Olivia wasn't terrible, at least not until recently. Olivia and I met numerous times, and while we were polite, I had the impression she wanted to quietly show me that Eric would always be hers first. When it was just the 3 of us, she made me feel alienated and uncomfortable. Initially, I made every attempt to befriend her, but my efforts were futile. It appeared that she had already made up her mind against me. To make matters worse, I unintentionally made it into a competition between ourselves. She wasn't going to take it lying down. Finally, around 5 days ago, something occurred. I was feeling quite ill, and because I work away from home, I didn't have someone to look after me. My roommate was on a trip, leaving me completely alone. Normally, I wouldn't rely on a male, but this time, I called my boyfriend and asked him to come over and help me out. He was apprehensive at first, but I assumed it was because he didn't want to catch whatever I had. So I told him it was only a stomach illness and he will be okay. But, even so, he appeared reluctant. I asked him what was going on, and he said he was going to watch a movie and then have lunch with Olivia. He was unsure whether he'd be able to make it. I was already sick and not feeling well, and Eric was prioritizing Olivia over me. I had always understood that if it came down to it, he would choose Olivia over me, but it still hurt. I became incredibly furious off and told him he should date Olivia instead, then hung up. I didn't answer any of his calls after that. An hour later, Eric arrived and apologized for what he did. I was relieved when he arrived because, honestly, if he hadn't, I would have ended our relationship. He informed me that he had canceled his arrangements with Olivia and even brought me homemade soup. That day, I felt really positive about him. We spent the day together, and by the time he left that night, I was feeling much better. But I had no idea my actions would have ramifications. Eric stopped contacting me the very following day. No calls or texts for the entire day. I panicked a little, thinking something horrible had happened to him. I tried to contact him throughout the day but had no luck. At approximately midnight, he called me back. He talked in an entirely different tone, serious, even upset. After inquiring if I felt better, he suggested I sit down. Then he broke up with me. At first, I assumed it was a joke, but he kept talking. He said it was difficult for him to come to this conclusion, but he had finally understood that my conduct was nothing but a bunch of red flags, and that he couldn't stay with me any longer. I was completely confused. As far as I was concerned, I had not done or said anything to him that would have raised a red flag, at least not knowingly. I had always strived to be a decent person and a good girlfriend. This was a major shock for me. I didn't know what to say, so I remained silent as he informed me he couldn't be with me anymore. Then he hung up. The suddenness of it all astounded me. We had just had such a nice time together the day before, and now he was telling us we were overdue for red flags. It didn't make sense. I ended up weeping myself to sleep that night because I couldn't contact or text him for help. After we broke up, he blocked me everywhere. There was no way for me to receive closure or an explanation. Eric didn't even have the decency to break up with me in person, despite how long we'd been dating. He also did not provide a good explanation. For the next 2 days, I was extremely distraught and preoccupied at work and when completing housework. I just couldn't accept that it had ended so quickly. I kept repeating our last few exchanges in my thoughts, trying to figure out what had prompted him to suggest that I had a lot of red flags, but I couldn't come up with anything. The Olivia factor had not even occurred to me because I hadn't seen her in a few weeks and had forgotten how much she dominated Eric's life. Anyway, last night I finally got a call from Eric. I was taken aback because I hadn't expected it. I had just started to digest our separation, so it felt quite sudden. I answered the phone, and he immediately began apologizing. He didn't even give me the opportunity to say anything at first. He sounded hysterical, so I let him vent. He said he didn't want to break up with me. Olivia was the one who made him do it. Apparently, she disliked the fact that I forced him to cancel plans with her and convinced him that it was a red sign. She even brought up a few of other seemingly innocuous things I do to depict me as a giant red flag. Eric said he had fallen for it. Olivia, he claimed, had fed him a series of lies, alleging that I was attempting to build a rift between them and that this was a warning sign. She also distorted things like me preparing meals I like or buying clothes for him that I believed he'd look beautiful in, making them appear as manipulative efforts to control his life. I couldn't believe anyone would fall for such rubbish, let alone break up over it, but Eric was probably an idiot. He then apologized for everything and begged me to accept him back. He claimed he was willing to do whatever it required. My blood was boiling, so I said nothing for a time. I struggled to keep my rage under control. All this time, I blamed myself for the breakup, believing it was my responsibility. But now I see that was all Olivia's doing, and she was most likely fine with it. I should have expected her to try anything to get back at me. After all, I had stolen Eric from right beneath her nose. When I was sick, his decision to care for me and cancel our plans must have made her perceive me as a competitor. She couldn't have it, so she made sure we broke up. Everything suddenly made clear. Eric was pleading with me over the phone, imploring me to accept him back. He even had the arrogance to say that Olivia would no longer be a problem because he would keep our connection a secret from her. I was appalled. Even after all had transpired, he couldn't realize how much Olivia was in charge of his life. If he had broken up with me for another reason, I might have considered taking him back. But I couldn't believe he ditched me over something Olivia had said without considering for himself. Eric was clearly an imbecile. Whether or not he kept our relationship covert, Olivia would maintain control over him, and he would continue to do anything she wanted like a puppet. What upset me even more was Eric's refusal to recognize that Olivia might not have his best interests at heart. He was even willing to hide our relationship in order to keep their so-called friendship. This was a huge red flag for me. I had no intention of getting back to him. I had already made up my mind the moment he revealed the true reason for the breakup. I'd cried enough for this person, and he didn't deserve it, but I couldn't just let it go without trying to put Olivia in her place. That's why I did something so selfish and manipulative, and, while I'm not proud of it, I believe it was necessary. Last night, I told my boyfriend that I would only get back with him if he notified Olivia about his decision and confronted her for controlling his life. He'd have to inform her that she wasn't his employer and that he'd be getting back with me regardless of her. Only if he did that would I contemplate getting back together, because if Olivia humiliated me, I would undoubtedly reciprocate the favor. When I told Eric what I wanted him to do, he was horrified and tried to persuade me to reconsider, stating it was excessive and unneeded. He protested for a long, trying to get out of it, but I was determined. I informed him that I would only respond if he texted her what I had asked. Otherwise, he may say farewell and remain broken up. After a few more minutes of fighting, Eric finally gave in. He sent Olivia those texts and even provided me with a screenshot as proof. I instantly hung up and blocked him. I knew it was petty and cruel, but I couldn't help it. I'd been upset over the past 3 days about our breakup, and this was the least I could do to feel some sense of justice. Aita? Am I the asshole for forcing Eric to send Olivia those texts, especially since I had no intention of responding in the first place? Update 1. It's been 2 days since I spoke with Eric, and he hasn't been able to reach me since. Olivia is unable to contact me since I have also blocked her. I initially felt awful about what I forced Eric to do, but after reading the replies below, I realize I don't have a good reason to feel that way. Eric had a choice, and he chose to send Olivia those texts because he wanted to be with me rather than her. It's not like I held him at gunpoint. He did exactly what he desired. Yes, lying to him about getting back together was wrong, I accept it, but I don't believe what I did was as horrible as what had happened to me. He didn't think twice before convincing me that I was the red flag in our relationship when it was truly him all along. He did everything his so-called BFF requested him to do, regardless of how it affected me or his own life. He had no idea how bad I felt throughout the time we were apart. I had no answers and started overthinking what I'd done, which just made me more puzzled. So forgive me if I don't feel too awful about what I did. I haven't told anyone about my breakup with Eric yet, but I assume I'll have to start shortly. Only a few hours earlier, one of my friends invited Eric and me to her birthday celebration. When I arrive without him, I will have to explain his absence. I'm dreading that part because I'm not sure what I'll say when people ask why we broke up. Especially since we were happy on the surface. I'll have to come up with something, but that's okay. At the very least, I am done with that relationship. Update 2. Hello everyone, it's been over a week since I broke up with Eric. I assumed that blocking Eric and his BFF Olivia would mean that I'd never have to interact with them again. Unfortunately, this was not the case. This morning, I received a call from a number I did not know. Naturally, I let it ring the first time, but when they called again, I responded. It was Olivia on the phone. As soon as I heard her voice, I was prepared to hang up because I had absolutely no desire to chat with her. But then she warned that if I hung up, it would only reveal that I was a coward and frightened to confront her. I should not have let it affect me, but it did. So I stayed on the call. Olivia then went on to say terrible things about me right in front of my face. She called me a variety of names for what I'd done, including a sneaky little liar, and expressed her relief that Eric and I had split up since he was too good for me. Then she called me the B word, which really irritated me, and I snapped. I told her just what I thought of her. I told her she was nothing more than Eric's backup girlfriend and would most likely spend her entire life trying to keep other girls away from him so she could have him all to herself. I believe I struck a nerve with that one because, as soon as I said it, she began fumbling and sounding like she was about to cry. I took advantage of that and went even further. I informed her that she could scream at me all she wanted, but Eric had the option not to send her those texts. It was his decision and he chose me over her. That was the final straw. On the other end, I could hear her start crying. I didn't feel sorry for her because she'd called to make me feel awful. But here she was, crying. I'm not sure if she and Eric are still on speaking terms, but I hope she runs to him and complains about what I said. If they come after me again, I'd love to put both of them in their place and remind them that I'm not someone they can mess with and get away with it. They aren't the only ones who have the right to damage others' sentiments. They need to realize that if they're comfortable handing it out, they should be equally comfortable receiving it. Update number 3. Hey, there. Olivia called me 2 days ago, and the conversation ended horribly for her. Like I stated, I was hoping Eric would confront me about it so I could tell them both off. That finally occurred today. The person who introduced us was hosting a party, and we were both invited. She was unaware that Eric and I had ended our relationship. Eric entered the party about an hour in, accompanied by Olivia. They both appeared ready to battle. I drew my friend aside and recounted the entire issue to her. I even offered to depart early in case things went wrong. While I wanted to cause a spectacle, I didn't want it to happen on my friend's birthday and steal the spotlight from her. It would not have been nice. But my friend suggested I stay. She admitted that she wouldn't mind if we confronted one another at the party because she wanted to see the drama play out in person, especially after what I'd told her. I had the decency to ignore Eric and Olivia since, if anyone was going to start a fight, it had to be them. I was classier than that. But when it came to teaching them their place, I was willing to fall to their level. Eric approached me about a half hour after they arrived at the party, while I was speaking with another guy. I wasn't flirting, just making normal small talk. I believe he simply wanted an excuse to put me down because he walked up and loudly stated that I had already moved on from him. He then called me a cheater and a phony in front of everyone. Olivia appeared behind him with a malicious smirk. I swear I wanted to slap that nasty smile off her face, but I managed to restrain myself. Eric was spouting crap right in my face, even bringing up the phone call from a few days ago. He said I was mistaken about Olivia being the backup since, in fact, I was the backup and not worth dating. I laughed in his face since, if I recall correctly, he was the one who came crawling back to me just days after dumping me over what Olivia had told him. He'd had his say. Now it was my chance to reveal him and his loving BFF for who they really were. I told him that both he and Olivia were much below my level. He should have counted himself lucky that he could persuade me to date him in the first place. As far as I was concerned, he was Olivia's spineless puppet, and no other woman would want him. At the very least, I was willing to give him a chance, but he blew that as well. Furthermore, his so-called BFF was depressed and insecure enough to want to end our relationship simply because he spent a day with me while I was unwell. She even utilized a new phone number to reach me, indicating how essential I was to her. Honestly, her acts betrayed her insecurity and pitiful nature. They were an ideal complement for one another. I genuinely hoped they got together because no one should have to cope with individuals like them. By then, the party had come to a halt. Everyone stared at us silently. Eric had nothing to say and simply stared at me. Olivia, without a clear response, began flinging expletives at me. She got up in my personal space, plainly trying to get me to punch her so she could retaliate. But I maintained my calm. I didn't even want to touch her. Eric decided to leave when she began to have a breakdown. They obviously did not want to be any more ashamed than they already were. Once again, their pitiful little attempt to humiliate me had failed. Eric had to literally drag Olivia away because she refused to accept defeat. After they went, my friend approached me, told me how awesome I was, and we all laughed about what occurred. We resumed partying and finished the evening on a high note with cocktails and a delicious dinner. I'm pleased with what happened because I got the closure I needed. Update 4. Hey everyone, here's a little update. I just found out that Olivia and Eric are finally together, LOL. It's been 3 months since our little altercation at the party, and I guess they recognized I was correct. No other reasonable person would put up with them separately, so they chose to date each other instead. I heard this from a friend of a friend, as I no longer communicate with any of them. As for me, I'm seeing a new guy who is exactly my type. I hope this works, and that he doesn't have a psycho best friend that he hasn't told me about. Now to the next story 8. My toxic best friend, overstepped by claiming maid of honor, disrupted wedding plans, and planned her wedding on my date to create chaos. Original post. Some background info about this girl. Let's call her Jess. At this point in her life, she's kind of a hot mess. She's one of those people who airs everything on Facebook, who has a new love of my life every month, and a new best friend every few months. Her relationships and friendships usually end terribly, with both sides hating each other. How did I become her best friend? Well, she hasn't always been this way. She was relatively normal 5 years ago when I met her, save for the normal, early 20s drama. But in the last 2 years, she's lost her mom to cancer and her grandpa to old age, and she doesn't have any other family. She dropped out of school and found out her boyfriend at the time was cheating on her. After the breakup, I was acting like a shoulder to cry on since she had pretty much hit rock bottom. A few months later, she was telling everyone how close we were and started tagging me as her best friend. A few months ago, I got engaged. Unbeknownst to me, she started telling everyone she was my maid of honor, even though I've always planned on making my sister my maid of honor. But this was right after Jess's mom had died, so I just improvised and said I would have 2 maid of honors. It's still not what I would have liked, but I literally couldn't bring myself to tell this poor girl I don't consider her my best friend. That was my first mistake. About a month after I got engaged, she met a guy. 2 weeks later, she was engaged. A week later, she was married. A month later, she was divorced. Separated? I don't know if it's legal yet. I don't know if anything was legal, but she changed her last name and is still going by that, so I'm guessing it was legal. Ever since the divorce, my own wedding planning has become unbearable. She is constantly telling me how marriage doesn't work, love can't save things, etc., etc., and criticizes how much I'm spending on my wedding when she had hers for a few hundred. Vegas wedding? It's gotten to the point where she's rude to the vendors I'm meeting with, but she gets really upset when I don't take her to meetings since she's the maid of honor. So I'm at the point where I just want to cut her out of the wedding, like I should have done in the first place. However, when I confessed this to a mutual friend, my friend let me know to be careful because Jess can be really vindictive. When she found out her ex from a few years ago was getting married, she tried to contact the bride and tell her he was cheating on her. He wasn't. One of her last besties was fired from her job because Jess made multiple email accounts and regularly contacted customer service complaining about her. And since she knows so much info about my wedding already, I'm really terrified that she'll somehow try to sabotage it. So basically, I don't know what to do at this point. I feel like this wedding is getting away from me, but I also don't know if it'd be less painful to keep her a part of it, because it would save me all the drama. I don't know what she's capable of, so I'm really worried that she'll somehow make everything harder for me if I don't just grin and bear it. Help. Clutter girl I've been comforting through traumatic times turns out to be batshit crazy, and now I think she's going to ruin my wedding if I don't go with the flow. Relevant comments. Comment 1. To add, it might be a good idea to have passwords with your vendors to confirm your identity. OP, thank you for the advice. I was actually considering the password thing, but I don't know if that's taking things too far. I guess I'm kind of worried about vendors resenting me for being high maintenance. But I hear about bridezillas, momzillas, in-lawzillas all the time, so hopefully this isn't the worst they've seen. Comment 2, Jesus just told her, Jess, you knew him for 3 weeks before you married him. What in the ever-loving fuck did you think was going to happen? If I've only been seeing a girl for 3 weeks, I won't even poop with her in a half-mile radius. Oops, seriously, the week before the wedding was everyone kindly saying, you sure? You've known him for awfully short time. And she responded, everyone's jealous because they can't be us. Yeah. Comment 3, sounds like you need to have a very uncomfortable talk with this girl. Tell her what you told us here and let her know her negative attitude has no place in planning your wedding. You're sorry things aren't working out for her, but she is not allowed to pile this stuff on you. Tell her that you cannot have her as a maid of honor, and since she seems to think so negatively about marriage, you wouldn't expect her to do this. Up to you if you even let her attend the wedding as a guest. Oh my God, I haven't even thought about explaining how her negative attitude towards marriage could be the excuse for not having her in the wedding party. That sounds ridiculously logical, but I've been blinded by a flurry of crazy. Thank you. Update. Guys. This went full-blown crazy. Before I could have a conversation with Jess, she confronted me about it. Apparently the mutual I confided in let the whole story leak, and a twisted, more dramatic version made its way back to Jess. Shit, meet a fan. It was an hour or two of me trying to explain to Jess in a somewhat calm manner that I felt she had overstepped her boundaries, and it was really taking a mental toll on me, while she yelled about what a terrible friend I was and how she's tired of putting all of her faith in the wrong people, and how she was tired of trying her best to be a good maid of honor. I made the mistake of pointing out that I had never asked her to be my maid of honor in the first place, and she responded with, well then I must be delusional. The first step is admitting you have a problem, so. Progress. Needless to say, we aren't on speaking terms. Shortly after that I took all of your advice and called all of my wedding vendors and let them know that my fiancé and I were going to be the only people making any decisions, and set up a confirmation word with them. Apparently this shit happens a lot because nobody even asked why. I accidentally forgot to contact the bakery making our cake, but luckily they called me and asked if I was certain I wanted to cancel the wedding cake. Apparently there was a voicemail left on their machine. Wonder how that happened. Here's where things get really nuts. A few weeks after our blow-up, she apparently met some guy who is the love of her life. A few weeks after that they're engaged. I can't make this shit up. She did it again. Then our mutual friends get invitations for her wedding, which is the same date as mine. But since they had RSVP'd for my wedding, a lot of them couldn't make it. A few days before her wedding, they have to cancel because he's already married. And you know what? So is she. I guess she never got officially divorced from that first quickie wedding. So as far as I know, no wedding actually happened. I have no idea if they still plan to. I'm just glad to be away from that circus. But anyways, I got married a few weeks ago. Everything was wonderful, the weather was great, and everyone present was a joy to be around. Except maybe my uncle, who gets a little too dancy when he's drunk, but you know. Family. Thank you to everyone who responded, and to everyone letting me know I'm not helping matters by going with the flow. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends, by running from crazy and not comforting it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Anyone else think mutual friends are kind of shitty? She was the one who told OP to be careful about Jess, yet she decided it would be a good idea to blab about what OP told her, knowing full well it would get back to Jess. Now instead of telling Jess on her own terms, OP got ambushed instead. OP. I actually asked her about it a few days after the blow-up. Her defense was that she didn't actually tell Jess, she told another mutual friend of ours, who told someone else, who told someone else, who told Jess, so technically it wasn't her fault. Which is how by the time it got to Jess the story was somewhere along the lines of, OMG, Bubble Sex 1 is telling everyone you're ruining her life and sabotaging the wedding. All of us met at work, we all worked at the same restaurant long ago, and it was always a drama-filled place. A lot of the same people still work there and still thrive off of the drama. I'm thinking it's time for me to move on from that specific crowd. Cliques are fun in middle school. In your 20s, not so much? Comment 2. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends. By running from crazy and not comforting it. I'd like to nominate the first candidate for your new policy. The mutual friend, who somehow let the story leak, and repeated to Jess a twisted, more dramatic version of what you had confided in her. Ope. I've decided to distance myself from that crowd. We're at different points in our lives, and I just don't find gossiping all that fun. My real besties, from high school who were all bridesmaids, have all grown up and we would never pull this crap. Comment 3. I bet Jess was never actually getting married this time. It was just a plot to ensure at least some of your friends didn't make your wedding. Oop. I suspect that as well, but since she's done it before I wouldn't be surprised if she actually went through with it. I'm assuming they were both trying to get divorced before the wedding and realized they wouldn't be able to in time, because some stuff takes time and can't be erased in a jiffy, so they couldn't do it. I get the feeling this guy is either really stupid or just as crazy as she is, so at least they've found each other? Now to the next story 9. Am I the asshole for refusing to help my father and stepmother and telling them they deserve the karma hitting them hard right now? So, when I was around 16, my father, 44 million, began seeing my stepmother Julia, 30 million, and they married 2 years later. Just to clarify, this woman never liked me. She's the reason I was kicked out of my house at 19. Since then, I haven't spoken with either my father or her, until a few days ago, when my father arrived at my place to talk. I'll get to that later, but first, I need to explain what went wrong so you can see who Julia truly is. My mother died when I was just 9 years old. My father had been in other relationships since then, but he was completely committed to Julia from the start. She moved in with us within a few months. Even though she was only a few years older than me, she required me to address her as mom. At the time, I was 16 and she was 24. We were just 8 years apart in age. I never called her mom, or saw her as maternal, since I thought it was inappropriate. Even if she had been older, I doubt I would have addressed her as mom, because my biological mother had died only 6 years earlier. I wasn't prepared to start calling someone else mom, and replacing her so quickly. Furthermore, when Julia made her request, she had only been with my father for 8 months. They might take their relationship at their own pace, but that didn't mean I had to accept her into my life at the same rate, especially since she hadn't tried to get along with me. I calmly informed her that I would not feel comfortable referring to her as my mother because I did not feel linked to her or saw her as a maternal figure. I don't believe I was impolite, but she began to pick on me for no apparent reason after that. She would either be extremely hostile or completely ignore me. It was strange, and it was evident that I refused to address her as mom. I never understood why it was important to her. As far as I was concerned, my father adored her and had totally accepted her as his companion. That should have been enough, but she was fixated on being my mother. She even behaved like she was, albeit not in a good or compassionate manner. She would order me around and pretend to have authority over me. It was as if she wanted to establish herself as a capable mother figure. This behavior bothered me. I'd remind her that she wasn't my mother and didn't need to be so involved in my life since I wasn't ready to give her the responsibility. She'd complain to my father, we'd argue, and things would become uncomfortable. But, in the end, my father and I loved each other enough to reconcile despite Julia. This was how we spent nearly 4 years. After they married, I assumed Julia would start acting normally because she no longer had any reason to be insecure. However, their marriage made her even more determined to become my mother. A few months after their wedding, she sat me down for the same conversation. This time, she said she would love it if I called her mom, since now that she and my father are married, it will help complete our family. She required that I acknowledge her as my mother before anything could happen. By then, I'd seen her true colors. I couldn't believe she had the arrogance to demand that I call her mom, after mistreating me for the previous 4 years. I wasn't especially pleased with their marriage because I knew she didn't like me, and to be honest, I didn't care for her either. I've never been one to mince things, and at 18, I made that abundantly plain to her. After the way she had treated me over the previous 4 years, I had no desire to accept her as my mother or assist her in realizing her dream of a perfect family. I advised her to concentrate on being married to my father and stop worrying about becoming my mother because it was pitiful. I informed her that I already had a mother, whom I adored, and that just because she died in an accident didn't mean the post was open. In very straightforward and respectful terms, I told her that I was not going to replace my mother and that she should stop trying. I also added that her fixation with being my mother was strange, scary, and completely unappreciated, especially given how brutally she had treated me simply because I refused to call her mom. I'm not proud of it because it wasn't very nice, but I did hint that her obsession was psychologically abnormal. That remark evidently irritated her, since she stopped speaking to me entirely following that chat. It was as if I didn't exist for her. At the time, I didn't think it was an issue. In fact, I was relieved when she eventually decided to stop bothering me. About a year later, I understood she had used that time to turn my father against me. It happened so gradually that I didn't realize my father was distancing himself until it was too late. When I realized, I attempted to fix things. I tried multiple times to bond with him, hanging out, talking, and reconnecting, but he was either too busy or constantly with Julia. I recognized that his priorities had evolved after his second marriage, and I attempted to give them space. But it backfired because Julia took up all of his available space in life. Things only got worse after I moved away to college. Whatever little communication I had with my father was vanishing as well. It felt dreadful, and I knew I needed to do something about it. One weekend, I planned to surprise my father by going home. I anticipated him to be pleased, but he appeared annoyed. He informed me he had planned to go out to dinner with Julia, but now that I was home, he couldn't do so. I found this quite offensive and challenged him about his actions. I told him he was acting aloof and strange, and it pained me that he wasn't even pleased with my surprise visit. I conveyed that it felt like he no longer cared about me. In despair, I lashed out at Julia, accusing her of turning him against me. This evolved into a full-fledged argument. My father told me that he knew I had something against Julia since the beginning. He said Julia wasn't attempting to turn him against me, but rather I was trying to turn him against her. He accused me of trying to brainwash him into thinking Julia was the bad guy, despite the fact that she had done everything she could to win me over. According to him, I was the one who turned down her attempts to bond because I did not want to betray my mother. He even suggested my mother would be upset with my behavior. My father informed me that making up tales about Julia to build a wedge between them would not succeed. Over time, I saw that Julia was gradually changing the narrative, telling my father that I had been ignoring and mistreating her from the beginning. Whenever my father was around, she was nothing but lovely, leading him to believe she was incapable of being mean to anyone. He gradually came to believe her account of events. He assumed I was causing issues because I couldn't accept Julia as his wife or come to terms with his departure. This was far from the truth, but my explanation fell on deaf ears. He accused me of attempting to sabotage their relationship and lying about Julia. Then he issued an ultimatum. Either I start respecting Julia, call her mom, and accept their relationship, or I leave. When my father said this, I didn't bother to argue. I hadn't unpacked anything yet, so I grabbed my bags and marched out, never looking back. After that, I went directly to my uncle's place. He was the closest relative I had. He's my mother's older brother and has always had a warm spot for me. I knew that no matter what challenges I had, he would assist me. At the time, I hadn't told my uncle much about Julia. I already knew he didn't like her or support my father's connection with her. Part of this was due to his loyalty to my mother, and part of it was because he thought the age difference between my father and Julia was too great. I didn't want him to detest my father any more than he already did, so I kept quiet. However, after I was kicked out, I told everything to him. He was infuriated. He told me that I had done the right thing by refusing to call her mom, and that Julia was a complete nutcase. He also called my father an absolute moron for believing all of her falsehoods. Once he realized the truth, he told me that he would take care of everything. He offered to cover all of my expenditures, including college tuition, which had previously been my father's burden. He also said that if I ever needed a place to stay, I could always come to him. Even after I graduated, he promised to help me out. True to his word, he supported me every step of the way and has become more of a father to me over the last 6 years than my biological father ever was. As I previously stated, I have not had touch with my father or Julia in 6 years. No one else in the family has. After I told my uncle everything, he was so enraged that he told everyone. I didn't ask him to do anything, but he was too angry to worry about the implications. He notified both my mother's and father's side of the family about the incident. According to what I've heard, no one has contacted my father or Julia since I was kicked out, as they were all against what had transpired. According to my uncle, several individuals attempted to persuade my father to listen, but he refused. He accused me of lying and said they should not trust me. Fortunately, My family knows I am not the person my father and Julia portrayed me to be. As a result, my father and Julia have been forced into extreme isolation. However, I doubt they care because they have not contacted anyone in the last 6 years. On the other hand, I'm doing well for myself. Following graduation from college, I began interning at my uncle's real estate firm. I eventually obtained my real estate license and relocated earlier this year from my former apartment to a much larger one in a more desirable location. I am no longer concerned about my finances. I've even started paying my uncle back, despite his insistence that he doesn't want anything from me. My financial situation is crucial because I believe it is what prompted my father to contact me again. Karma seemed to have caught up with him and Julia. A few months after giving birth, Julia was engaged in a horrific accident. She is currently bedridden and unable to move. My dad paid me a visit a few days ago. During our talk, I discovered that he had quit his job a few years before to start his own firm. Unfortunately, things haven't been going well because the epidemic struck shortly after he started. He has been experiencing financial difficulties. Furthermore, Julia refused to work, leaving him with sole responsibility for financial management. This circumstance is not surprising to me. Julia quit her work shortly after they got married, which he chose to disregard. Things got even more difficult financially when she found she was pregnant and decided to keep the kid. She gave birth approximately 6 months ago. Then, last month, she was involved in a horrific accident while driving herself home from lunch with her friends. She totaled the automobile due to icy roads and a little too much champagne. Fortunately, she was not charged, but it doesn't matter because she severely hurt herself and is now bedridden, unable to move as she heals. My father is in a bad situation because their medical insurance does not cover hiring a nurse. He needs to pay for one out of pocket because he can't stay at home to care for Julia and must work to prevent bankruptcy. Meanwhile, they've been leaving their kid with Julia's parents, but her parents just informed my father that they couldn't watch the child every day because they needed to live their own life. This resulted in a dispute between my father and Julia's parents, with him accusing them of being greedy. As a result, they refused to look after the baby anymore. My father, now out of alternatives, admitted he had no one else to turn to and chose to contact me for assistance. When he paid me a visit, he recounted everything in the hopes that I would intervene. Without hesitation, I declined. I'm not good around newborns, and I definitely didn't want anything to do with Julia's child. Given how much agony the two of them had given me in the past, I refused to allow myself to be used to solving their problems. I told my dad that, while it was good to see him, I was no longer here to serve his purpose. He became enraged, claiming he had gone to considerable lengths to obtain my contact information. From his statements, I deduced that he must have pestered some relatives until they informed him where I lived. I didn't think this was a great attempt, and his entitlement simply made me angry. I reminded him that when I needed him the most, when I begged him to believe me, he had refused. He chose Julia over me, and now I'm choosing myself over him. Despite my repeated requests, he refused to leave. I finally lost my patience. I warned him that if he didn't leave, I would contact the cops, which would end horribly for him. In a heated exchange, I informed him I had no sympathy for him and was not interested in assisting or forgiving him. I said he and Julia deserved all they were going through. After all, Julia had continually lied about me, portraying me as the monster. My father had decided to trust her falsehoods and prioritize her ludicrous requests, even to the point of kicking me out. Instead of believing his own daughter, he favored his wife and her unreasonable expectations. When I said that, he looked shocked and swiftly departed without saying anything. I now feel guilty about what they are going through. I know it's bad, and I'm not sure if I should have stated they deserved it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm not the judge. Still, the guilt weighs on me. Edit. I called my uncle to tell him of my father's visit. He spoke with a few relatives and confirmed that my father had reportedly been contacting everyone after many years, searching for my location. Most people had not responded, but one family on my father's side, who isn't very close to me, felt sorry for him and provided him my contact information and address. So, I was correct. My father did not go to the great lengths that he stated. He was only attempting to make me feel bad. Update 1. I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my post. It was a lengthy post, and I have not discussed it in depth with anyone other than my uncle. It was good to finally get everything off my chest, particularly regarding Julia. Her actions deeply traumatized me when I was younger. Based on the remarks, I believe I was correct in stating that Julia may have had some mental health issues. Her eagerness for me to embrace her as my mother was overwhelming. That being said, I can only infer it. I cannot diagnose her. However, I believe she would benefit greatly from seeing a psychiatrist to determine what was driving her conduct. It seems ridiculous for her to act the way she did simply because I refused to call her or accept her as my mother. Throughout my father's relationship with Julia, I tried to make explanations for his behavior. I knew he loved her, so I tried not to make a scene. But it didn't seem to matter. He didn't care. When it came down to it, he chose Julia above me, his biological daughter. So he had the guts to come up at my house after 6 years of no communication, asking me to assist him out. Even now, I know he was not sincerely sorry. He just apologized because he wanted my aid, not because he truly meant it. In reaction, I have taken precautions to protect myself. I've upgraded security measures around my house in case he shows up again. If he does and refuses to leave when I ask, I will contact the cops right away. Ideally, I'd prefer that he not show up at all, but I realize that's wishful thinking. He's going to come back and attempt to get me to help him again. He already has my contact details. He had been contacting me for the past few days, but I blocked him after a few hours. It's been nearly 5 days since his visit, and I presume he's been taking his time. However, I have a feeling he'll come up again. Just so you know, I'm not afraid of what he may do, it's just that I'm already emotionally spent, and I don't want a long argument with him. That is why I am taking every precaution to avoid protracted chats and have him depart as soon as possible. I'm hoping that when I see him again, it won't be too emotionally draining. Update 2. 2 days ago, I posted here that I was confident my father would return. Actually, he did. He waited a week since our last meeting and came up today. When I spotted him standing outside and ringing the doorbell, I told him over the intercom that I didn't want to speak to him. I had just gotten home from work, so I was exhausted and not in the mood to deal with him. When he refused to go, I grabbed my phone, contacted the cops, and reported him for trespassing. He couldn't hear me from inside and had no idea I'd contacted the police. Until they arrived, he waited outside my door, beating on it and complaining that I was being too hard on him. He stated Julia admitted to making everything up and that they were both deeply remorseful for everything. He explained that all they could do now was apologize and hope for the best, as they couldn't go back in time to fix things. He insisted I give them some leniency, especially given what they're going through. I couldn't believe that even after discovering Julia had lied to him, prompting him to kick me out, he became defensive rather than admitting his sins. He was taking the entire issue so nonchalantly, which was annoying. However, I maintained my composure and did not speak to him. Thankfully, the cops arrived shortly, because his "what can we do about it now" attitude was really getting on my nerves. It was especially distressing because he had wrecked his relationship with his own daughter due to Julia's lies and still couldn't hold her accountable. When the cops arrived, he lost control and began yelling at me, claiming I had lost my mind and had no right to call the cops on my own father. I didn't care. I described the entire thing to the cops. I doubt he will face any charges, but I hope this teaches him a lesson. He did not physically resist being dragged away, but he did stare at me the entire time. I could see he was mortified, but I didn't mind. I was so pleased that he was being removed and that I would no longer have to deal with him. It may sound callous, but after today, seeing how little he appeared to care that Julia lied and ruined our relationship, I feel validated. What I mentioned was completely accurate. He and Julia deserved each other, and more importantly, they earned everything that was happening to them. Perhaps the small one didn't deserve it though. The only person I feel sorry for in this circumstance is my half-brother. There's not much I can do about it but hope for the best. I sincerely hope for the best for him, at least since I have nothing against him. He's merely a youngster who has no idea what his parents are like. I'm praying that he doesn't get caught up in all of this commotion and has to suffer as a result. If he does, he will be the second child Julia and my father have failed, after me. Update 3. After the officers took him away, my father did not contact me for over 3 weeks. Then, a few days ago, I got an SMS accusing me of being awful. The message stated that I was a terrible person and that they regretted reaching out to me in the first place. It stated they were ridiculous to expect me to understand their situation because I've always been a selfish brat who didn't care about anyone else. According to the book, selfishness, not Julia, damaged my connection with my father. The message came from a number I didn't recognize, so I assumed it was my father or Julia. It doesn't matter. That was the last I heard from them, and they haven't contacted me again since. Interestingly, I heard about my father and Julia again today. My uncle called to tell me that a few cousins on my father's side had notified him of their current position. Apparently, my father and Julia are now living separately because he has been requested to leave his home. Julia's parents have moved in to care for her and the baby. According to my uncle, My father considered leaving the infant in foster care until they could get back on their feet. Julia became outraged and threatened to divorce him. Although he was able to calm her down, she was still so enraged that she had him kicked out of the house while she healed. I find it amusing that after kicking me out, he is now experiencing the same situation. One thing is certain, Julia has a mental health problem. Normal people do not behave in such extremes. That being said, I don't have to worry about it because she's no longer in my life. I just think it's funny that my father is going through this, and I felt compelled to share. This is really his karma. Now to the next story 10. My father secretly took out $73,000 in loans under my name, ruined my credit, and left me with the debt. Now I must decide whether to file charges. Original post. I, 21, graduated from university with my undergrad in 2024. At the time of graduating I thought that I had around $10,000 of federal student loans. Recently my mom left my emotionally abusive father, leaving just her, me and my sibling by ourselves. I was happy at this decision until I found out that the $10,000 of debt I thought I was in was actually far more than that. I knew that throughout my first year of university he had taken out some private student loans for me. I was told, by my father, that since I was only 18 at the time the bank we loaned from wouldn't allow me to pull out loans since I didn't have good credit. He told me that he would be able to take out these student loans under my mother's name and that he'd pay them off as soon as I'm done with school. I found out recently that the loans were in fact under my name with my mom just as a cosigner. Also that the loans were far more than was needed to pay for my tuition. She did not know this either. BTW. He had taken out a total of $48,000 in private student loans under my name. I remember signing for these. He did not forge my signature. When I asked exactly what I was signing for or more details about everything, he told me, "Stop asking questions and just trust me." Every time I tried to push for answers I got that response. I trusted him. I trusted that he would not screw me over. I had trusted him to help build my credit when I turned 18. I found out now that he's completely messed up my credit too. My TransUnion score is 669 and my Equifax score is 577. He used my tuition money for rent and bills. I do not know what he used the money he got from my credit cards for. Throughout the past few years, he had convinced us that he was making a lot of money from his job. I now realize that he was likely lying about that and just secretly screwing me over, and my mom too, since he's also messed up her credit. I have 3 closed credit cards that are in debt, I think. One is $6,055 balance, $2,250 credit limit, with $6,055 due. The second is $12,864 reported balance, $1,000 credit limit, with $0 due. Does this second one mean that I don't have to pay off the balance? The third one is $6,228 balance, $6,000 credit limit, with $714 due. From what I have looked up, it seems like I owe a little over $35,000 in credit card debt. I also know that he's messed up my siblings' credit too. I'm not sure by how much. I haven't had the chance to look into that. Also, I think it's important to note that he currently owes 3 different family members over $200,000. I found this out this week too. Flash forward to now, I found out about these loans a few days ago. I now have a total of $58,000 in student loan debt in addition to my credit debt. My first student loan payment is due in less than 3 weeks. I need advice. I don't want to take legal action against him. I don't want him to end up in jail. He is currently helping us by paying for our rent and car even though my mom has left him. My mom doesn't currently have a job, though she is looking, and my job doesn't make nearly enough to provide for ourselves without his help. In August, I will start a higher paying job, and possibly pick up a second job to pay off my debt. So I could ask him to just send me money every month instead of paying for rent and the car. I could use that money to help pay off the debt. As of right now, I am not worried about my federal student loans. The minimum payment is doable and I will receive around $14,000 of tuition reimbursement in March-April, so that will help. Should I consolidate the private loans? Should I refinance? I've briefly considered filing for bankruptcy, since I have no assets, but I know that's probably a bad idea. Is there a way for me to not have to deal with this debt without landing him in a lot of trouble? Relevant comments. Did OOP know what they signed? OOP. It was an electronic signature for the loan where you use the mouse to draw out your signature. He called me over to sign it on his laptop. At the time I still thought that the money would be under my mother's name. I also did not know how much money it would be. Commenter 1. I don't want to take legal action against him. Okay, then you're going to have to pay the loans or declare bankruptcy. Commenter 2. I don't want to take legal action against him. I don't want him to end up in jail. You need to get past this. because he doesn't care what he does to you. And he isn't only hurting you, he is hurting and taking advantage of a lot of people, and is actively ruining your futures to benefit himself. He is currently helping us by paying for our rent and car even though my mom has left him. He isn't helping you, he is providing just enough to hope you don't take action against him. And the money is money he owes you, not that he is using to support you out of care for you and your family. He is not helping. He is using money he took from you and others to pay for that. You are paying for that help in the form of increasing debt, not him. And if he doesn't face serious repercussions for his actions, he is going to keep doing it and you will never get out of the increasing debt he'll continue to saddle you and everyone else with. At the very least, you need to make sure you and your siblings' credit is locked down now to prevent him from taking out new cards and loans under your names. But you really need to just report him to the police so you can remove that debt. Why are you so worried about ruining his life, when he isn't worried about ruining the lives of you, your siblings and everyone else he has taken advantage of? If anyone ruins his life, it will be him by his own actions. Update. Editor's note. Remove the top part of the post as it is a rehash of the original post. Update. After reading all these responses and talking with some close friends of mine, I see that the best thing to do is file against him. I brought up the topic to my mother last night and she, being very religious, said, "No, don't do that. God wouldn't want you to harm another person like this, let alone your own father." She said that she'd rather take on the private student loan debt by refinancing and transferring it to her, but honestly that wouldn't remove the credit card debt and it'd leave her with the debt instead. I don't think that's a good choice. I think that if I file against my dad, my mother will kick me out, so if I file, I will already be prepared to move out. That being said, I currently only have $2,000 saved up from work and that will not be enough to move out on my own. I'd need more money to get a car, place, and overall survive. I just moved to the city I am in less than a year ago, so I don't have many people to rely on here. My boyfriend offered to let me live at his family's house, but I'd still need to be able to travel to and from work and I don't want to overstay my welcome. I also don't have the option to move because I have to work in the state of Florida to qualify for my university's tuition reimbursement. In March, I have over $14,000 of tuition reimbursement coming in. My best bet would be to wait till March and then leave. It breaks my heart to do this because I could be disowned by every person in my family, but I can't let myself live with this debt. Prior to this, I thought I only had $10,000 worth of debt, and with that I could have easily lived a good life and paid it off quickly. I'm still not 100% set on this decision, but I do realize that it is the logical thing to do. I want to speak with my sibling to see how much debt my father put them in and to see if they'd want to file too. I also want to speak with a lawyer or someone more knowledgeable than me about this. Does anyone have any advice based on this update? Update number 2 in response to the comments I've gotten. My mom's religious comments are obviously ridiculous, but I'm mostly looking for help with how to file or what to expect. I have records showing $23,000 of refunds went to a bank account he controlled. I didn't see a dime of that money and I think he used it to pay for a vacation. NGL. Relevant comments. Is it possible for OOP to find a new place or rent near their job? OOP. I'm a substitute teacher. I work at different schools around the county, so it wouldn't be possible for me to get a job near work, unfortunately. How did OOP's father get involved in OOP signing the documents with their mother? OOP. All I did was sign. He filled out everything. Now, I understand looking back that I was stupid for signing without asking. But, after some further looking into things, I see that the amount of money I was refunded by my school was an insane amount and not an amount I could have spent by myself in one semester, aka $12,000 extra refunded in a semester where my tuition was only $2,000. He must have used that money himself on non-education related things. Also, the credit cards I did not sign for. I didn't even know that you signed for credit cards. He did that all himself. Commenter 1. It sounds to me like both your mom and your dad are in this together. And that if you don't file against them, they will come out ahead, and you will come out behind. Commenter 2. God didn't want your mom to leave your dad either, but she did. So, she doesn't have a leg to stand on when is preaching to you. Report him to anyone you can. Also, if you were under 18 years old you can't be held responsible for any contracts. Now to the next story. 11. I grew up overshadowed by the golden child. She tried to seduce my husband, we exposed her, and my mother framed me, refusing her faults. Hello, everyone, I need some help and maybe a place to rant. This will be a long one, so please bear with me. I, 33F, have always had a problematic connection with my younger sister, Julia, 30F. Julia is our family's golden child, which has caused me grief since we were little. Growing up, Our parents always preferred Julia. She was the beautiful, talented, and all-around perfect person. Meanwhile, I was the older sister who consistently fell short of their expectations. My earliest memories include occasions when I felt invisible next to her. One memory strikes out so vividly. I was about 8 years old and it was my birthday. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, fantasizing about the cake, the gifts, and the attention. But as soon as Julia entered the room, everyone's attention went to her. She was just 5 at the time, but she had a talent for stealing the show. She began singing a song she had learned in kindergarten, and everyone applauded, completely forgetting that it was my special day. My parents didn't notice the tears welling up in my eyes as I watched them adore her. This was a pattern that continued throughout our childhood. Julia received the greatest clothes, the most attention, and all of the compliments. I recall feeling pleased of myself after receiving a B on a math test. However, when I presented it to my parents, they only glanced at it before asking Julia about her day. She had colored a picture at school, and that was considered more impressive. The hardest aspect was that Julia was well aware of her position within the family. She wasn't a malevolent child, but she knew how to use circumstances to her advantage. If we ever fought, as siblings do, she would scream and run to our parents, who would always support her side. I was always the one that got scolded, regardless of the situation. The dynamics remained rather stable as we grew older. Julia excelled in whatever she did. She was a straight A student, a star athlete, and eventually a social butterfly with a large network of friends. In contrast, I suffered both intellectually and socially. I was shy, introverted, and had difficulty establishing friends. Our parents frequently compared us, always adversely to me. "Why can't you be more like Julia?" was a constant refrain in our home. High school was really stressful. Julia was a freshman when I was a senior, and she rapidly gained popularity. She joined the cheerleading squad, was chosen class president, and boys wanted to date her. I was the nerdy senior who rarely had any friends and spent the most of his time in the library. She seemed to be the center of my existence. One incident from high school still bothers me. There was a major dance coming up, and I had finally worked up the guts to ask a boy I liked to go with me. To my astonishment and happiness, he replied yes. But a week before the dance, he canceled, claiming he had invited someone else. Someone else turned out to be Julia. She had no idea I had asked him, but it didn't matter. She got to go to the dance with him, whilst I stayed at home, devastated and alone. After high school, I attended a local community college, while Julia received a scholarship to a prominent university. Our parents were understandably pleased of her, but it hurt to see how little they cared about my accomplishments. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition, but Julia's expenses were covered by our parents. They paid her many visits, attended her college functions, and were continuously positive about her progress. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself, both emotionally and financially. I eventually earned a nursing degree, while Julia went to law school. By then, I had learnt not to seek my parents' approval. I moved out, obtained a job, and attempted to establish a life for myself. But the agony of those early years never left me. Julia and I remained in touch, but our connection was strained. She was always the successful, attractive sister, but I was just myself. Fast forward a few years, I met a beautiful man named Alex and we married. For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated and cherished. Alex was aware of my family dynamics and was really helpful. He helped me realize my own worth beyond the shadows cast by my parents and sister. We purchased a home, and I began to feel like I could finally leave the past behind. But Julia returned to my life in an unexpected way. She had completed law school and was working for a respected firm. She became engaged to a man who seemed perfect in every aspect. Our parents were ecstatic and couldn't stop talking about the forthcoming wedding. I tried to be pleased for her, but old feelings of inadequacy and hatred came back. Julia asked me to be her maid of honor. I was taken aback. We weren't friends, and I questioned why she would want me in such an important capacity, but she insisted on rebuilding our connection. I reluctantly consented, believing that this would be an opportunity to repair old hurts. The wedding preparations were a nightmare. Julia was a bridezilla, demanding and domineering. Every choice had to go via her, and she frequently rejected my thoughts and proposals. It was evident that she had not changed much. She still desired to be the center of attention. But I gritted my teeth and went along with it, hoping to support her and even gain some of her favor. Next came the bridal shower. It was a spectacular event hosted by our parents and attended by Julia's numerous friends and colleagues. I felt out of place and uncomfortable, but I kept a brave face. During the event, our mother delivered a speech praising Julia to the skies. She stated how proud they were of her accomplishments and how attractive she appeared. I stood there, feeling invisible yet again. But then something unexpected occurred. Julia seized the microphone and began speaking. She thanked everyone for attending, then turned to face me. Her response was, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge my sister, who has always been there for me. I know I haven't always shown it, but I appreciate everything she's done. She's strong, kind, and an amazing person. I'm lucky to have her as my sister." I was stunned. Julia has never publicly recognized me like this before. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for a little minute, I believed our relationship could alter. Perhaps this was a tipping point. However, the goodwill was short-lived. Julia called me in a panic about a week before her wedding. She had misplaced the family heirloom necklace that our grandmother had given us, and she was scheduled to wear it on her wedding day. She was hysterical, and I dashed over to assist her in finding it. We flipped her place upside down and still couldn't find it. 2 days later, Julia called me again, accusing me of stealing the necklace. She claimed I must have taken it out of jealousy. I was astonished and hurt. All I had done was attempt to help her, and now she was accusing me of stealing. Of course, our parents believed her, as they usually did with Julia. I was devastated. Eventually, Julia discovered the necklace in a drawer she had forgotten about, but the damage had already occurred. She never apologized for accusing me, and neither did our parents. The wedding went on, but I felt like an outsider in my own family. After the wedding catastrophe, Alex and I chose to concentrate on our respective lives and families. Alex, who had always been technologically inclined, began researching ways to make money online. Initially, it was a side venture, but he quickly discovered a great formula and began earning thousands of dollars. Within a year, his web projects were bringing in tens of thousands, and our financial situation had much improved. With our newly acquired fortune, we purchased a stunning mansion in a famous area. Alex surprised me with a Bugatti as a symbol of our success, and we soon had 2 beautiful children. Life was great, or so it appeared. However, my parents remained unconcerned about our accomplishments. Despite Julia's recent marital issues, they paid her periodic visits and were more engaged in her life. Julia had been living on her own since her marriage ended and was struggling with her work. She had been laid off from a top legal firm and was struggling to make ends meet. Her jealousy grew worse when she saw our success. She came over one day, claiming to want to reconnect and spend time with her nieces and nephew. Initially, I believed her. I assumed she was sincerely attempting to restore our shattered relationship. However, it did not take long to learn her genuine objectives. She started dropping up unannounced, often when Alex was home alone. She would dress provocatively and make subtle, flirty comments to him. Alex, being the faithful spouse he is, quickly informed me of her behavior. We were both stunned and outraged by her conduct. Rather than address her immediately, we devised a strategy to reveal her true colors. We installed hidden cameras in the living room and other public locations to catch her in the act. It wasn't long until we obtained the evidence we required. Julia made her move one day while I was supposed to be out running errands. She approached Alex, placed her hand on his arm, and whispered provocative things into his ear. "Come on, Alex," she said. "You deserve someone who truly appreciates you. Someone like me." Alex played along just long enough to keep her talking. "Julia, you need to stop. I love my wife, and this is incredibly inappropriate." But Julia persisted, leaning closer. "She doesn't have to know. It'll be our little secret." That was the moment we'd been waiting for. Alex forcibly pushed her away, saying, "Julia, I'm serious. You need to leave. This is wrong on so many levels." We documented the entire event on camera. With the proof in hand, we decided to take action. First, we convened a family meeting, which included Julia's husband, who had been unaware of her activities. When everyone had gathered, we showed the video. The room was silent as the video aired. Julia's husband's face became red with rage, and my parents were completely astonished. The video concluded with a tense silence before Julia's husband stood up. "Julia, how could you? After everything, you try to seduce your own sister's husband?" His voice was full of surprise and hurt. Julia stammered, attempting to come up with an excuse, but there was no disputing what we had witnessed. Our parents looked at her, disappointed and disgusted. "Julia, we trusted you. We always believed you were the better daughter, but this is beyond forgiveness," my mother replied, her voice cracking. My dad shook his head. "You've brought shame to our family. I don't even know who you are anymore." Julia's husband promptly filed for divorce. He left that same day, accompanied by their 2 children. My parents, who had always elevated Julia to a pedestal, were forced to confront the truth of her behavior. They moved away from her, unable to look at her in the same manner again. Julia's world came crashing down. She has lost her husband, her children, and the support of our parents. She tried to reach out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive her that readily. The scars were too fresh, and the treachery was too severe. Alex and I continued to construct our lives together, stronger than ever. Julia's betrayal, however terrible, had eventually brought us together. We knew we could handle anything as long as we had each other. Life went on, but the scars from the past remained. My parents, who had always preferred Julia, struggled to accept her conduct. They visited less frequently, and when they did, it was evident that they were still dealing with their disappointment. They attempted to appear normal, but the strain was evident. Julia, on the other hand, was attempting to gather up the pieces of her broken existence. She had lost her work and was struggling financially. Her attempts to reconnect with her husband had been unsuccessful, and he had filed for full custody of their children. She was alone and desperate. One day, she appeared at our door, looking more ragged and broken than I had ever seen her. She pleaded with me to let her in so she could explain. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. She sat at our kitchen table, tears flowing down her cheeks, admitting everything. "I'm so sorry," she wailed. "I've been jealous of you for so long. I saw how happy you were, how successful, and I couldn't stand it. I thought if I could take Alex away, I'd feel better. But I was wrong. I've lost everything." Her words struck me hard. For so long, I had regarded Julia as the favored one, the one who had everything. I never realized how deep her insecurities went. I felt sympathy and hatred, but mostly I was tired. Tired of the drama, the suffering, and the never-ending cycle of rivalry and animosity. "I don't know what to say, Julia," I said. "You've hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe. But I can't keep living with this anger. It's poisoning me, and it's poisoning our family." Julia nodded, tears still running down her cheeks. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am." We sat quietly for a while, the weight of our common history hanging thick in the air. Julia eventually went, leaving me to my own thoughts. Could I ever really forgive her? Could we ever get past this? In the weeks that followed, I concentrated on my family and my personal recovery. Alex was a rock for me every step of the process. We discussed Julia, the past, and what the future might hold. I slowly began to let go of some of my anger and bitterness. I recognized that holding on to it was not benefiting anyone, least of all myself. Julia continued to struggle, but she started to make changes. She began going to therapy, getting a job, and rebuilding her relationship with her kids. It wasn't easy, and there were failures along the road, but she was making an effort, which was something. My parents remained distant. The golden child had fallen, and they had no idea how to deal with it. They continued to see Julia on occasion, but it was evident that nothing would ever be the same. They came to see us less and less, and when they did, the tension was evident. It seemed as if they didn't know how to interact to me without the usual dynamic of favoritism. One sunny afternoon, as I watched my children play in our lovely garden, I realized something profound. Despite everything, I was content. I had a nice husband, wonderful children, and a life I was pleased with. Julia's acts had been painful, but they had also brought me to a place of strength and resilience. In the end, life continued. The scars of the past would never be completely healed, but they did not have to define the future. Julia and I started to restore our connection gradually and cautiously. It wasn't perfect and never will be, but it was a start. For the time being, I've decided to focus on the now and the future. The past had its purpose, but it no longer kept me captive. Alex and I continued to create a life together full of love, laughter, and the occasional struggle. Our beautiful home exceeded all of our expectations. The mansion was huge, beautiful, and ideal for raising a family. The children enjoyed their new rooms and the wide backyard where they could play. Alex and I were happier than ever, and for a while, it appeared that we had put the turmoil behind. Part 3. An unexpected turn. Life seems to have settled into a peaceful rhythm. Julia and I worked hard on our relationship, and it gradually began to improve. She apologized sincerely, and I noticed a true improvement in her behavior. We began meeting for coffee, discussing our lives, and even planned family outings together. It was a relief to finally feel like I had a sister I could count on. Meanwhile, Alex's career soared. He accepted an early retirement option from his software employer, which came with a large compensation. We were now financially secure beyond our wildest expectations, and Alex was excited to spend more time with the family and work on personal projects. However, the peace we had worked so hard for was quickly broken. My mother, who had always preferred Julia, appeared reluctant to accept the changes in our family dynamic. She couldn't get the suspicion that I had set Julia up with the video evidence. The thought persisted in her head, and she became increasingly aloof and hostile. One morning, while I was preparing breakfast, the cops appeared at our door with a search warrant. They discovered other items in our garage that I had never seen before, including pieces from a stolen car that had been reported missing months before. I was stunned as they handcuffed me and hauled me into custody. I kept thinking that it was a terrible mistake. Alex, who was on a business trip, rushed home as soon as he received the news. He quickly engaged one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the country, Rachel Hargrove, a talented but pricey barrister. Rachel assured us that she would get to the bottom of things and clear my name. The court date arrived soon. Rachel worked tirelessly in the days leading up to the trial, going over every detail and questioning everybody who may provide information. During our investigations, we discovered the awful truth. My own mother had planned the entire plot. Apparently, my mother had underworld friends who helped her obtain the stolen car parts. She had planted them in our garage, attempting to tarnish my reputation and, in her warped manner, teach me a lesson, for what she saw as my betrayal of Julia. She refused to recognize that her golden child was at fault, instead believing that I was the manipulator. The trial was tough. The prosecution presented their case, convinced that they had sufficient evidence to convict me. But Rachel was prepared. She provided irrefutable evidence that the car parts had been installed in our garage without our knowledge. She also called a witness, one of my mother's accomplices, who claimed that my mother had coordinated the entire operation. It barely took the jury 2 hours to deliberate. They judged me not guilty of all accusations. I was free, but the ordeal had left a lasting scar. My mother, however, was not so fortunate. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in jail for fraud and conspiracy. The judge made it clear that her conduct were both illegal and morally abhorrent. The courtroom became hushed as the verdict was read. My mother's expression was one of shock and rage. She never expected her scheme would fail so spectacularly. As they dragged her away, she gave me a hateful look. It was a sad moment, but I knew justice had been done. Following the trial, our family was left to pick up the pieces. Julia was horrified by our mother's behavior and suffered from emotions of guilt and humiliation. She relied on me for support, and for the first time, I felt like the elder sister, the protector. Alex and I took some time to recover from our tragedy. We spent more time with our children, making positive memories and ensuring they felt safe and loved. Our bond grew deeper, and we recognized that no matter what obstacles we faced, we'd always have each other. Julia, determined to atone for our mother's sins, worked tirelessly to reconstruct her life. She acquired a new job and began dating again. She stayed close to us, enjoying the family support she had previously taken for granted. My father struggled to accept my mother's infidelity. He had always been more passive, matching her powerful demeanor. But this occurrence shocked him to the core. He paid her a visit in prison, but their connection remained difficult and distant. Life ultimately discovered a new normal. Our family gatherings were tiny, but they were full of true love and connection. We honestly discussed the past, our faults, and the lessons we'd learned. It wasn't flawless, but it was authentic, which was enough. Through it all, Alex was my rock. His constant encouragement and affection kept me going, even on the worst days. His early retirement allowed Dad to spend more time with us, and he launched a new business that matched his technical knowledge with his desire to serve others. We shifted our focus to the future, instilling new traditions and ensuring our children grew up in a loving and supportive atmosphere. The past would continue to be a part of our tale, but it no longer defined us. 5 years had gone since the traumatic circumstances that led to my mother's imprisonment. Throughout those years, our lives gradually returned to a state of normalcy. Alex and I continued to prosper, our children grew up happy and loved, and Julia became a vital part of our family, having entirely repaired our previously shattered connection. Despite the anguish of the past, we were able to construct a tranquil and pleasant existence. Our family gatherings, while smaller, were filled with laughter and genuine connection. We frequently reminisced on the past, appreciating the lessons learned and the strength we found in one another. However, the serenity we had established was shattered once more when my mother was freed from prison. She had served her sentence, but her bitterness and animosity had not subsided. She was a different woman now, elderly and virtually blind, but her hatred for me had grown even deeper. Unbeknownst to us, my mother was scheming her retribution. She believed I had destroyed her life and wanted to hold me accountable. One fateful day, she took a shotgun from a nearby farm and started out to get me. Her objective was to catch me off surprise and take my life. I had no notion how dangerous the situation was. It was a bright afternoon, and I had taken the kids to the park. Alex was out running errands, while Julia was at work. I was sitting on a bench, watching my children play, when I suddenly felt a searing pain. I turned to see my mother standing a few feet away, her shotgun pointed directly at me. Her expression was a mix of wrath and determination. She screamed something incoherent and fired several bullets in rapid succession. Despite her fading eyesight and weak hands, 2 rounds reached their target. One impacted me in the buttocks, while the other damaged my right leg. The pain was intense, and I collapsed to the floor, unable to move. Bystanders phoned the police after they heard gunfire. When my mother saw the commotion and realized her plan had failed, she attempted to run but was swiftly captured by authorities. She was detained and eventually charged with attempted murder, which resulted in a 10-year prison sentence. I was brought to the hospital and had surgery to remove the bullets and fix the damage. The doctors told Alex and Julia that I would recover completely, but the physical and emotional scars would take a long time to heal. Throughout my 3-week hospital stay, Alex never left my side. He was my rock, offering constant support and strength. Julia came every day, bringing me my favorite delicacies and lifting my spirits with her stories and laughs. Their devotion and dedication were the pillars that helped me get through the hardest times. During those long, peaceful hours in the hospital, I had plenty of time to think about all that had transpired. My mother's actions left me feeling shocked and betrayed, which was significant. I couldn't comprehend how she let her anger for me consume her to the point that she attempted to kill me. Despite the anguish and bewilderment, there was a strong sense of appreciation. I was alive, and I had a loving family who supported me through thick and thin. Writing this piece is my way of absorbing what has transpired. It's a chance for me to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the path, who has offered encouraging words when I needed them the most. Your support has meant everything to me. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tight during my mother's trial. The prosecution provided information about her crime, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. My mother sat there, a shell of her former self, but the rage and bitterness in her eyes were clear. She displayed no sorrow, only icy determination, which exacerbated the already awful situation. The jury did not take long to deliberate. Given the clear evidence of her deliberate actions, they convicted her of attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, highlighting the gravity of her conduct and the breach of trust in our family. As she was carried away, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. This was my mother, the woman who once looked after me, now damned by her own hatred and actions. Life after the trial was a lengthy process of recovery. The physical wounds began to heal, but the emotional scars were deeper. Alex was great throughout it all, his constant support and love providing me the strength I required. He balanced his work and caring for the children, ensuring that they understood what had happened in a way that preserved their innocence. Julia was similarly amazing. Despite her own troubled connection with our mother, she supported me and offered comfort and understanding. She had really changed, and our friendship was stronger than ever. We relied on one another, finding solace in our common experiences and hope for a brighter future. During my recovery, Alex and I had many long chats about our lives and our goals for the future. We choose to focus on providing a stable, loving atmosphere for our children, making them feel safe and valued. Our house became a haven for laughter, love, and the warmth of family. The community's support was overwhelming. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers sent warm words and gestures. It reminded me of people's goodness and helped me restore my trust in humanity. I received numerous comments from people who had followed our tale, expressing their encouragement and sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity. 3 weeks after the incident, I felt strong enough to compose this post. It's a chance for me to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the path, who has offered encouraging words when I needed them the most. Your support has meant everything to me. Most of all, I'd like to thank my husband, Alex, and my sister Julia. Alex, you've been my rock, my strength, and my greatest love. Your constant support and love have helped me get through the toughest moments. Julia, you've taught me what true forgiveness and redemption look like. Our bond has never been stronger, and I am grateful every day for the sister you have become. Life is unexpected, and the future is constantly unknown. But with the love and support of those that matter most, I'm confident I can tackle whatever comes my way. Thank you for taking part in my adventure. As I look ahead, I am filled with hope. My mother's acts, however painful, did not break me. They have helped me become stronger and more resilient. I am resolved to live a life filled with love, kindness, and compassion, and to instill in my children the value of forgiveness and family. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.